What's going on, everybody? Welcome aboard to Liam's First Take. And we're going to be going over my first thoughts on UFC 288. This is a great card, fantastic card, going down in my neck of the woods. It's taking place in New Jersey. Aljamain Sterling, New York's own baby. New York stand up, represent. Our champion is in the building, defending in arguably his toughest test to date against Henry Cejudo, the messenger, the king of cringe. He's known by many names, but he's also known by Triple C. That's 3 championships, Olympic and 2 in the UFC. Flyweight champion, bantamweight champion. He's coming back to claim it once again. It's a fantastic fight. I'm really excited about the matchup. I think that it's really compelling and it deserves a lot of breakdown and analysis. But on top of that, I kind of want to show you guys a little bit more about the process, a little bit more of the behind the scenes. So I haven't looked at any of these fights from a deep handicapping perspective yet. We're going to do that today together a little bit and, see what we come up with. So instead of the show I normally do with Rich, I try and come really prepared to that show. I try and have an opinion. I try and, do my research well in advance. But this is a show that's going to be a little bit different, right? It's a Sunday night. It's early in the week. But we actually don't have some sloppy UFC fight night. We have a really compelling pay-per-view with great fights top to bottom. There's only 4 debutantes on the card. So there's a lot of things that we could know from past experience. I have a huge Rolodex of tape on a lot of these fighters. So there's a lot of things that I'll know right off the bat and some opinions that I'll start to form. And I'll share with you some of my thought process, and you'll see how I develop some of these reads at times instead of just, me jumping into, the deep end of the pool, kind of take you from point A to point B, how I started my process and then how I eventually get to where we're going. So we'll start with this main event. I got to own up to biases up front, right? I think that one thing people don't take into account enough in their betting is their biases. I have huge biases. Number one, New York in the building, baby. They didn't kill us yet on the hockey side of things, but, I'm a New Yorker. I like New York fighters. I'll be a little biased in that direction. I have to make sure I do extra due diligence when New York fighters are fighting, or else I might get caught up in the trap, caught up in the wave, right? Same thing with wrestlers, right? I'm a wrestler myself. I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Maybe if somebody's from the Kron Gracie system, I'll be biased towards them. These are things that you have to know about yourself. Find out, what are the things that I would be, drawn into easily. You could sell me on an Irish guy with a good guillotine. Shout out Sean Brady, right? You could just get me with some of these things. So you got to know what ticks in yourself and what could cause you to have some biases and some, flaws in your handicapping process. Aljamain Sterling is one of the very few UFC fighters I've met in person. I took a photograph with the guy. He wrestled Division III in college, right? You can't be a bigger fan of somebody. I told people I was a Piotr Jan truther. I told people he was going to get beat by Aljo. I said that Aljo in the first fight looked worse than I've ever seen him. And he talked about in his interviews, he does a podcast. I listened to it at the time. I don't really catch it all the time now. He kind of brings in more guests and stuff, but he used to have just a solo podcast. And I would listen very closely to what he would say. And he came on the show right after the title fight. He's got the title. He's not really proud of it and whatever. And he said, I didn't fight as well as I expected. I felt like I was slowing down. I felt like I was having these problems and I couldn't move my arm in the lead up to camp. He was having shoulder problems. Guys, Aljo's not a bad wrestler. He's not a bad grappler. And he was getting sunned by Piotr Jan in the wrestling and the grappling in the first fight. And I just knew that could not be the case if he was full health and full strength. And he was grabbing a hold of the guy, but he couldn't do nothing with it, right? He was getting muscled around. He was getting bullied. That's not the Aljo we're used to seeing. So for me, I felt like there was big problems in that first fight with Piotr Jan. So one of my biggest wins to date, one of my favorite bets ever is on Aljamain Sterling. If you want to just stack up every bias you could have, similar background, whatever, from the same place, same style that we like in terms of fighting, all this stuff. And I am telling you right off the bat, my gut reaction to this fight is it's one of the worst stylistic matchups you can make for Aljamain because Aljamain normally has a distinct wrestling advantage in his fights. So just from a gut level perspective, I think that this is the hardest fight on paper for Aljo in quite some time. What made the TJ fight intriguing was TJ's wrestling was a bit of an unknown. I think that's fair to say, in the sense that he hadn't been forced to use it much recently. When he had used it, he was often getting the better of Sandhagen. right? And Sandhagen's a guy that, he kind of, at the time, and he's admitted to this, he was kind of just too static in those neutral wrestling positions. He'd let you hang out on the back and these kind of things for a while. So when I think about this fight, when I start breaking it down, the first thing I think about is it's going to be tough for Aljo to get it where his skills are the best. Now, Aljo is a show closer from the back, right? Ask Corey Sandhagen. He took him out in less than a minute. Or, if it wasn't less than a minute, it was less than 2. Okay. Like, he just took the guy out of the fight instantly. He's one of the best guys. We've seen now what Song Yadong's done and all these other fighters, right? In the wake of Aljamain Sterling. So Aljo's got a unique ability to take the back and find unique lethal finishes right away, but he also can ride it out and he can win positionally and take fights over that way. In both cases, it's going to be harder to do that, in my opinion, against Henry. I haven't seen Henry get held down in many static positions ever. Again, and I haven't revisited all the tape. Maybe I forgot about the fight where he just got out grappled or something, but I don't really remember that ever. Out scrambling a guy like Henry Cejudo just doesn't seem very repeatable over time. The back body triangle is a game changer, right? It's changed the MMA meta. I don't think that you have as good a chance of winning a fight if you don't know how to do the back body triangle as if you do. We've just seen so many guys, right? Cody Durden, right? If you watch the UFC on Saturday night, he used that to perfection against Charles Johnson, a guy people thought, this guy's going to have the advantage on the feet, and he's going to have the advantage here. He can hardly get it there because that back body triangle, you lock it in, and it's very difficult now to get back to a good position. So that is where I'm starting off on this fight, right? That's just my gut level reaction, not having looked at the tail of the tape, not having looked at the recent fights. Just that's my guts, right? And that's half of what we're doing here. You got to make sure. One of the things I do at the beginning of the week, part of my process, is I kind of just write down, or I send out in the Discord or whatever. I just get it down somewhere and take a screenshot of it. My picks, my leans initially, because if it doesn't check the box on my lean initially and then my lean after research, I should probably just withhold my money and kind of see where I went wrong. What was my gut instinct just missing some critical components about the matchup, or did the research really tell me something? And if you find that you do this process over time and you can identify, this is a good spot to go into, all power to you. But for example, Charles Johnson, right? At the beginning of the week, I thought Cody Durden was going to win. I thought it was going to be a gross split decision, right? And I wrote that down as my first prediction. But then by the end of the week, my research process, everything I had seen leading up, I talked myself into it. He's got Jordan Burroughs in his corner. He did the wrestling, like all these things that we do to ourselves sometimes when we're betting. And so by the end of it, I just ended up passing on the fight because my lean was Charles Johnson and the line was getting better. But at the beginning of the week, I didn't think the same thing, because sometimes overthinking and over-researching can cost us money. So the thing that I want to do that's a little different on this stream as well, so I want to be a little bit more interactive with the chat. We got so many sharp guys already making their presence felt. So want to shout out everybody that's contributed so far. We got Mr. D in the building. We got my guy Moyes. We got Cole Stein up in here. YBB. Jonathan says, F the bookies. Them New York boys are something else. And I'll tell you this, right? Because my guy WW does say, Liam, Henry KO's your New York boy. Aljo, sorry. It's all right. It's a grown man's game. I understand how it goes. But I'll tell you this, guys. The road to bantamweight glory right now in mixed martial arts, period, runs through the great state of New York. You got Patchy Mix in Bellator. I told you to watch that, man. I told you what was going to happen. First guy I ever saw fight live in person. I knew he was the truth from then till now, and he still is. So Patchy Mix, the road to glory in Bellator runs through him. And as far as it's concerned with, right now, Aljamain Sterling's the gold standard. But Henry Cejudo is a legitimate challenger. He is a guy that's extremely competitive, guys. How do you beat somebody like Mighty Mouse, a GOAT? It's not by being head and shoulders above them always. Sometimes you got to beat them by an inch. Sometimes you got to beat them by, you got a little bit of grease on the wheels. So you need to have something going for you to beat the GOATs. And for me, when Henry did interviews on the MMA Hour, I had a feeling that this guy was going to beat Demetrius Johnson. I wasn't even a bettor at the time. But when I had or not a serious better, you know what I'm saying? But I just had this feeling that Henry's talking. He said, all I have to do is go out there and do things right. Because when you do things right, good things happen. He was putting no pressure on himself. He is an elite competitor who has, traveled the world for the best martial arts skills. He trains at Fight Ready Mixed Martial Arts in Arizona. So the fact that he's been retired in his prime for a couple of years and training the John Jones, the elite guys in the world coming in to get looks from Henry Cejudo, Mighty Mouse Johnson himself, by the way, all these guys going in to get looks from Cejudo. And we're supposed to believe that Cejudo is some washed guy off the couch. I mean, like, that's just bullshit. As far as I'm concerned, that's complete hogwash. Now, as far as this fight goes, could there be ring rust? Could there be some adjustment period from Henry? I think that's reasonable. I think that's a potential flaw for Henry here coming back. But do you not think he's going to have done insane preparation rounds and worked with a lot of the best guys? Is not Arizona a hub of bantamweight talent? I mean, just think about it. Granted, when you think about Las Vegas, Nevada, and New York, you also have a cluster of bantamweight talent. So it's not like one and the other. But I'm saying we can't discount Henry here. There's a reason that this fight opened minus 150, right? On the Aljamain Sterling side. I checked on the Bet Online opener, minus 150. And they're dealing, about a pick 'em right now. It was like minus 104, I think, earlier, minus 116, maybe on the comeback. I could pull up the odds. But when I was looking at Vegas, minus 115 consensus to the Cejudo side. So not only were they not favoring Aljo, they're actually favoring Henry right now today in Las Vegas, Nevada. And they're pretty good at what they do, right? You never met a bookie with a part-time job, most certainly in Las Vegas. So when you talk about the respect that the odds makers are putting on Henry, that's serious, right? I talked about, if you guys don't follow me on Twitter at Liam Picks Fights, that's okay. But I put out a tweet today where I talked about the fact that Henry has never closed as a pick'em. He's lost twice as a big dog. Otherwise, right, the guy has just been favored like minus 500 in most of his fights, right? Like most Henry Cejudo lines were not close. Even when he was the dog, most of the time it was like over 2-1 dog. So it's weird. It's just weird, this line right now. It's a pick'em fight with a defending champion. That's weird. And then on top of that, the defending champion's been active. He's beaten a lot of the best guys. He's looked dominant at times doing it. It's a little bit puzzling, but I believe that is the odds makers saying Henry Cejudo is going to show up like the old Henry Cejudo. He's in shape, right? You don't think that they do their due diligence, right? In terms of the odds maker, they are going to know whether Henry's showing up for real or not, and they're going to try and book it accordingly. I think they're trying to get some Aljamain Sterling booking. I mean, frankly, look at the last fight. They tried to book, TJ Dillashaw in that last fight, and they were just booking it at plus 150. They held it there. Not here, right? Way different scenario. So for me, this is not something that I want to take lightly. I'm going to be watching the line movement over the course of this week. In terms of profitable betting trends, I haven't looked at them yet, so I'm going to produce those over the course of the week. We'll discuss them more on the other shows, but just off a gut instinct, Aljamain Sterling has been very profitable to the submission prop, but just at the wide odds, his decision props have cashed that over time. Probably also been a profitable angle. So I'll do some due diligence over the course of the week, but I think that those would be the kind of ways I'd look to approach Aljo. I don't think it's very likely he's going to KO Henry Cejudo. But again, we saw in that TJ Dillashaw fight, I actually took the KO very late, not something that I could have given out to people or anything, but because the line went from like plus 1,200 to plus 900, like 8 minutes before the fight on Bet Online. I was like, all right, that's too weird to not take some of that. So I took a plus 1,100 or whatever stale on one of the domestics. And that was an insane fight where the bookmaker probably had inside information that TJ had no shoulder. And so he went out there as a sacrificial lamb, basically. They booked it with no respect for all the money that was coming in on TJ. And for me, that was a little bit telling. This time, some early money came in on Cejudo. Make no mistake about that. It pushed the line down on Bet Online. But, I think that a pick'em here is appropriate in some sense, because when you just think about a theoretical line, the more unknowns that you have, it should push it closer to 50-50. So the known quantity here is Aljamain Sterling, right? And he's an exceptional wrestler and grappler. I think that he's probably a better pure grappler than Henry Cejudo. I think anybody would acknowledge that. But the question is, will it matter? Because if he can't take him down and he can't, hop on his back standing or find a transitional guillotine or some, I would say, relatively low percentage submission. So the thing Mind Your Own, shout out, also pulled up in the building, says if he wants the takedown, he will get it. Talking about Henry Cejudo, because he first says Henry is a fantastic fighter. I'm assuming that you're still talking about Henry. Now, if that's the case, I don't know that Henry wants takedowns here. Because to tell you the truth, I think Henry's best chance to lose this fight is via submission. Aljamain Sterling is one of the best grapplers in the UFC. If people don't know that yet, I don't know if they're paying attention. The way he dominates physically in terms of that back body triangle is debilitating. That will suck the life out of you. People are like, why did Jan look terrible there? And then Marab did it a different way because the New York boys can teach you how to wrestle a different way. But the thing was, right, Aljamain Sterling, he has phenomenal top control. He's got brutal ground and pound. He was landing heavy elbows. I thought he deserved a 10-8 round against Petr Yan, tell you the truth. So, not in every round, but in the rounds where he was on the back for the entire round, landing vicious ground and pound when he had the opportunities and otherwise trying to choke the man unconscious. It's like, that's the definition of MMA. That's what we're trying to do here. He tried to finish the fight from second one to the end, and the other guy was completely dominated. It's like, that is a 10-8 round. But in all of those bitter grapes aside, right, he still got the win. Cashed me a very nice ticket there. So shout out to Aljamain. God bless him for it. Huge win for them New York boys in D3 wrestling. But D3 wrestling coming up against this guy, Henry Cejudo, that might be where rubber meets the road. Because, guys, I wrestled D3. I've wrestled some of the best guys from D1. I know that there is a little bit of a difference, right? The best guys in D3 are very damn good. But the best guys in D1 are like elite guys that go on to compete for world and Olympic titles. And that's not the case very often for D3 and D2 athletes. It's not like it can happen. There are definitely exceptions to the rule, and there's many of them. But Aljo is a phenomenal grappler. His wrestling is very good and functional for MMA. But if they went on the mat right now and did a wrestling match, Henry Cejudo would still probably dominate because he is a much higher caliber wrestler. And I think all wrestlers understand what I'm talking about. But I think the general fight, public might feel a little bit differently. So I just want to point that out. But the better wrestler doesn't always win because the better wrestler can get tired. They can get hurt. They can, make a mistake and get submitted. So all of those are factors to take into account here. But I think that on the feet, Henry Cejudo is a superior fighter. Not by a massive margin. I think Aljo is very good on the feet. I think he's underrated on the feet. Shout out to my guy, Fight Talk Only, in the building as well. Appreciate you, my brother. Now, when I'm looking at just how I'm going to approach this, I'm definitely going to take the market into account because I think there's some things that are very hard to know unless you're close to the situation. As regards a fight like this, what's Henry Cejudo's motivation? Like, what is he trying to get out of this? He's going to be a father of 2 children coming up. Maybe he needs the bag, right? These are things I take everything into account. I want to know his motivation. I want to hear what he has to say about the fight as well. But the number one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and revisit what did the recent tape look like for Henry Cejudo? What is the likelihood that he could still look like that? And how does it fare against what we've seen from Aljo? The problem with Aljo is it's kind of hard to rate some of his recent performances. What does that TJ Dillashaw fight really mean? What does that mean? It's like, it's very hard to take that into account in your cap, but it's the most recent footage and it's not Aljo's fault. He did everything right. He went out there and beat the shit out of a guy who shouldn't have been in there, so more power to him. I think that this is a fight that will be, great fodder for conversation. There's going to be a lot of people on both sides. That's the nature of a pick'em fight. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see where this shakes out. I'm excited to see where I shake out on this. But I disclose my biases to you guys up front. I know who I'll be rooting for in this fight. I will be rooting for Aljamain Sterling. But I'm not rooting against Henry Cejudo. I like Henry. He's my boy. He's always been my boy, but he had his time in the sun, and it would be nice if D3 Wrestling got to put one more on the mantle, one more for them Renzo Gracie boys, one more for Matt Serra and Ray Longo and the guys who don't get any respect in the best MMA gym conversation, despite producing Aljamain Sterling, Merab Dvalishvili, Chris Weidman, Matt Serra, on top of others. I just feel like these guys are criminally underrated. Our guy Matt Frevola as well. He's got a tough assignment, obviously. The Iron Chin Drew Dober. We'll get to that fight along the way. But guys, feel free if you guys have questions, things you want to get off your chest, whatever. Fire them away in the comments, and we're gonna try and get to those as well. I don't have a bedtime. We can rock here as long as we need to. So cheers to you guys. Appreciate y'all being here. Shout out to Mind Your Own says agree on the Patchy being well-rounded. Shout out, my man. Welterweight says, or WW, I don't know if it's welterweight or not. That's just how my MMA brain works. Piotr hands go up into a shell when Aljo throws the jab and shoots at Piotr's hips. Henry never shells up like that. I agree. He's got that more, Taekwondo type stance. It's kind of sick. Or karate stance, excuse me. Good call. Quickest tips in MMA. Let's go. Fair. I don't disagree with any of that. Patchy Mix, arguably the best bantamweight in the world, says Furio. You're not going to get any dissension from me, my brother. I think, I put something out there where I was saying people are telling me they wouldn't favor Patchy Mix to beat anybody in the top 10 in the UFC. And those people are high on crack. That's what I would say. Shout out to my guy, Rips and Picks in the building. What's up, Liam in chat? Nothing like the late night grind. You know it, brother. We don't go to sleep when we're tired. We go to sleep when the job's finished. You know what I'm saying? Shout out as well. New logo is fire, my man. Guys, if you haven't noticed, rocking with the new logos, a little bit of an upgrade, investing in the show, trying to do more on this channel as well in terms of content. We're here on a Sunday night. That's a new thing for us, but I'm going to try and make that a regular staple, especially when the UFC gives us something worth talking about. It'd be hard to come on here and spew opinions on fighters I've never heard of until the week I have to start doing research. But when I really know the people and there's interesting stuff to talk about, I'm more than happy to come on here. And I really want to invest in the channel. So appreciate you guys. And I truly thank you for the support. I invested in it and I appreciate that comment. Ring Rust got me leaning towards Aljo, says Jonathan SM. And I think a lot of people are going to lean that way. Shout out to Furio, makes another great point. Says Aljo very underrated on the feet. I agree with this. Awkward style and very effective. It's true. He throws a lot, right? He puts a lot of volume out there. It makes it very hard to get close to him because he's always doing something. And that's hard to get close to. You have to really pick your spots on the timing. But what I think Henry does well, and what I think makes it an interesting stylistic clash, is that Henry kicks the legs really, really hard, right? Especially that was a later adaptation in his career. He started leaning all the way into that, just trying to blast the legs out from under people. So then his boxing and his knees and all the other lethal strikes he wants to throw, they become much more effective. And Henry, he kind of took a little bit from Mighty Mouse. And I love the dynamic between those two guys, right? Because, Henry's a good sport about it. He brings in Mighty Mouse. He does the videos and stuff with him. And they talk some real, interesting game planning and tidbits in there. And Henry said, this guy bullied me so bad in the clinch. And he's like, I thought I was going to be good there because I knew how to wrestle. He's like, I was convinced that I was going to be good in those positions. And, what we've seen from Henry is he's gotten much better in the clinch as well. He's gotten much more violent in the clinch. He's stopped thinking like a wrestler when he's in the clinch because it's a dangerous spot. You can't be in there thinking about what I'm going to do to grab a hold in this. It's got to be all the way in or all the way out. And if you're inside, you got to be attacking violently inside. And I think that's an adjustment we've seen from Henry over the course of his career. He was always a good outside striker, but he was very uncomfortable on the inside exchanges. He either wanted to wrestle or strike, right? And that's understandable. But after the first Mighty Mouse fight, he went all over the world. He did a bunch of martial arts. And I truly believe he came back a much different fighter, and he's looked much better ever since. I thought that he would give Volkanovski an honest fight. And people thought I was insane for saying that. But what makes Volkanovski great is not only his kickboxing, which is fantastic. It is his competitive spirit. It's his willingness. It's his want. He's an insane psycho competitor for every round, for every minute. And Henry's cut from the same cloth. I think that Aljo is a great fighter, but I don't know if he is like a Michael Jordan psycho, like Henry Cejudo kind of is, and I just think that that's something that it's an intangible. It's something you can't put on paper. I can't go point out, exactly why that's true, but I just feel like it is. I don't know that Aljo could go win an Olympic medal, because winning an Olympic medal isn't always about skill. It's about being the best on a day and being an ornery prick and just like needing to win. I'm telling you, I've seen these guys, and not every great wrestler, and there's some of them that are wonderful human beings, right? Jordan Burroughs, I met him in person. He seemed like a wonderful human being, was a genuine nice guy, had the time of day. Most wrestlers that I have, come into contact with at various points that are at the absolute apex, they're hardly sociable in a sense. Like, they're just insane competitors that can't relate to normal people in a way. Where Aljo, I met him in person. He seems like a guy. He seems like a normal, nice guy that you would run into at a bar that also just happens to be very good at what he does, and he could turn it on in the cage. I don't think he's that violent a dude. I think Henry's a more violent dude when it comes down to it. I think he'd take your lunch money more. I think he's more of a bully in that sense. And so could Aljo go out there and school him up? He absolutely could. He's got the skills to do that. He's the best grappler in the bantamweight division in the UFC. I think that's fair to say. But this is where the rubber meets the road. Can you get to takedowns? I'm interested to see. What a fascinating main event. We spent 26 minutes just talking about that, just talking to the great people here in the chat. So next up, let's talk a little bit about this co-main event, ladies and gentlemen. The last thing I'll do here is I'll just circle back to some people in the chat because I really appreciate you guys being here, rocking with us. We got over 50 people rocking with us, almost 1 o'clock in the evening Eastern time. Cheshire's Cat says, Liam is rad. I appreciate you, my brother. Thank you for that. Is Aljo going to be a lot bigger? Is Aljo's cardio suspect? Those are great questions, and thank you so much for asking a question, Mel. I'll tell you, I think that Aljamain's cardio is it's not bad. That's not the right word for it. It's just hard for him to fight for the full 25 minutes at the same pace, because fighting for 25 minutes is very hard, right? It's not something that the human body is really meant to do. Chael Sonnen has talked about this. And so you see sometimes guys will go out there and fight a little bit slower pace, or they'll go out there and just spend themselves early in a 5-round fight and then get killed, right? Those are the things that I think, Aljo has had a tough time pacing himself in the past. I think he's gotten so much better at that. I think that's one of the things that came with being a champion, that came with those championship level fights, the 5-rounders. He didn't really get that experience against Corey Sandhagen. No fault of Corey's, right? He just got caught early. It happens sometimes. But if that fight had gotten extended, it could have looked a whole bit different, right? Instead, it was just over before it started. So, what could have been, right? And I think that was a 3-rounder even, because the UFC doesn't know how to schedule a main event. But in any case, right, it's just, when you look at this guy's career, he didn't have all this 5-round experience built up to go into these fights, and he's had to adapt. Additionally, he was dealing with the injury, so I felt like he was fighting at a pace of self-destruction against Petr Yan before that DQ, tell you the truth. But then I thought that when he fought Petr Yan, right, guys, understand that he closed against Petr Yan the first time, like -110 or something, right? This is from memory, so let me pull up betmma.tip so I'm not speaking gibberish here. Make sure I have some facts backing this up. Don't just want to give you complete bro talk right now. But what I can do for the interim is shout out to all the hockey fans in here. I gotten some comments on the Avs, comments on the Kraken, so shout out to all our Seattle people rocking with us. But now we got it pulled up, guys. So Aljamain Sterling, first time he fought Petr Yan, closed a +100 underdog the night that he fought Petr Yan, according to betmma.tips, okay? +100 against Petr Yan the first time, and he loses the fight. And what did we see the next fight? We see Aljamain Sterling get as high as 370 is what I bet. I don't know what everybody else bet. I don't think it got higher than plus 400 or plus 425 or something like that. But just the disrespect that came from that fight, I felt like people were writing him off and not giving any credence to all the work he had done prior to that fight. And I truly believe that Aljo was injured in that fight, because look at what he produced in the subsequent contest. It just blew me away. And he showed that he knew, I have to win 3 rounds off the rip against this guy. No doubt about it. He's a hard guy to finish. He's a hard guy to put away. But if I could bank 3 rounds and then fight conservatively, fight him just enough, fight him just as much as I have to get through these rounds and not get hurt, and mix in the wrestling just enough that I don't tire myself out, don't wrestle into a hole, but wrestle just enough that I can keep him second guessing and thinking about it, and make him tired and make him want to go a slower pace. That's exactly, he fought what I thought was almost a perfect fight against Petr Yan that second time around. And the thing for Aljo that's hard is that he's huge. You asked how big he is. Aljo is huge. He's my size, right? He's like, and I walk around, 165 pounds, or 160 pounds, right? Like he's my size. He's a big fellow for 135 pounds. It's remarkable to me that he makes it. And I do think he's going to be bigger than Henry. But I think that Henry probably has that cardio edge. I think he could push just a little bit harder over the 25 minutes. So it's really a great question, and it's a fantastic point. Henry's best trait is being a winner, says Rips and Picks. My man from Arizona. There's his bias. He's undisclosed. Shout out. But he says he just finds a way to get the W on the ground. Very rare trait in combat sports. So true, my brother. So true. I think that Henry is a really underrated guy because of the gimmick, because of the persona, by some segments of the fan base. I do think that's why people might discount his skills, his real abilities. I think that's why he's been overlooked at times by the casual public. But Henry Cejudo is one of the best fighters that we've seen in recent years. And, if he continues, if he got this win over Aljamain Sterling, we're talking about a resume that is, insane. It's one of the best resumes in the history of the sport. So Henry Cejudo, now granted, it's been some circumstance of this and that, but you can't deny a man with wins over Demetrius Johnson, TJ Dillashaw via knockout. If he beat Aljamain Sterling, it's like that's, you just beat a big 3, my brother. You just beat 3 of the best. That's pretty hard to deny. At 2 weight classes, he did it at 25, he moved up, he did it again. It's like, damn, that's pretty hard to deny if he does that. So shout out to our guy, Henry Cejudo. Next up, co-main event, Belal Muhammad. Remember the name. Taking on Gilbert Burns. This is an interesting one. I thought that Jorge Masvidal was live against Gilbert Burns. Not crazy live. I didn't end up betting it, but just because I thought he looked a little bit soft on the scale and things like that. But I thought he was going to be aggressive offensively. And I've always questioned just a little bit Gilbert's chin. I've had my skepticism over time. But he's been fighting a lot more intelligently in recent years. And I got to say, Mr. D just hit the nail on the head, right? Heart wants Burns, but something telling me Belal's going to get it done. Belal has a little bit of that winning trait about him, right? I don't think he was going to beat Leon Edwards by hook or by crook that night because he was starting to get styled on and he ate some big damage early. But, the eye poke really took away from what was otherwise, a reasonably competitive fight. And I think that Belal Muhammad, he's a guy that I don't want to come around on Belal, but just he's undeniable in a sense of how many wins he's accumulated over time. I faded him with Sean Brady. I have not faded him very much along the way. I disclose my biases up front. You're an Irish guy. You're slinging guillotines and overhand rights and stuff. Yeah, you can get my attention. I'll be a fan of yours. Grit and guillotines is your slogan. I mean, come on. I have to bet that guy. But I also did bet against a guy whose name was Muhammad, in in Fight Island. So that was not a good idea by me overall. I don't think Sean Brady even wanted to be out there, much less to fight anybody that night. So I think Sean, he's got to actually, I think he ended up pulling out of that fight. So God bless him. I hope he gets better. But Belal, I think that Bo Jackson makes a great point in the comments here. Belal will land more strikes. He does throw a little bit more volume. I think that Mel makes a good point. You should worry about Belal's chin. I do think that not in the sense that Belal has a bad chin, but I think in this matchup, certainly we would, I think all agree that Burns has a little bit more power naturally in his shots, but I don't think that we're going to see Gilbert Burns necessarily go to, his power punching in this fight. I think it's most likely that we see Gilbert try and wrestle and grapple proactively in this fight. I think that will be tough in that we've seen guys like Damian Maia and other really talented fighters struggle, but the physicality of Gilbert Burns is a difference maker. And I think that he is sometimes underrated in that he is an elite jiu-jitsu player. Elite. He doesn't always show it with his finishing capabilities inside the octagon. I don't know that his jiu-jitsu has necessarily translated perfectly at all times for MMA, because sometimes there's a little bit of openness to it. There's a little bit of space and fun and playfulness that you can only have in jiu-jitsu. But when you watch this guy roll and compete, he's different. He's not like these other UFC guys. And then you see him go against somebody like Damian Maia and you go, holy shit. There are levels to this grappling stuff, because he did so good in that fight, getting back up to his feet, rolling, creating an exchange. And it looked like he was in danger at various points, and he was so comfortable, right? He's just a guy who's very comfortable in jiu-jitsu. And so I don't think that Belal has a clear advantage anywhere here except for cardio and pace. I do think he could push harder for 15 minutes than Gilbert Burns. And sometimes that's the difference maker in fights. I always give credit to John Anik. Some people give credit to me, and I appreciate them for that, but it's just not for me. John Anik said it first, and it's ABCs always bet on cardio. It's just sometimes cardio is a difference maker. So I find it difficult to bet against guys that have clearly better cardio on paper, right? That's something that is a hesitation for me. And again, it's a bias, I'll acknowledge. But I want to shout out, because the chat is filling up so fast. I don't want to miss everybody's great commentary here. I'm going to scroll back just a bit. Furio says, I bet Jorge versus Burns, and I love Burns here. Very interesting. Got to bet the numbers, not the fighters. Correct. And good point. Burns has all finishing equity on the feet, and Belal can be hittable at times. Burns' strikes also look good to judges. I would say he has more finishing equity on the feet, but my skepticism of Gilbert's chin prevents me from saying that he has no finishing equity. Additionally, if you had asked me what the finishing equity for Belal Muhammad was on the feet against Sean Brady, I would have put it at low. I would have thought it was low. Even though I thought he would have landed, I thought he would have outpointed him. Belal Muhammad by knockout was not on my bingo card, right? It's like that surprised me. So for me, Belal has continued to improve, right? And one other point I want to make, I like to talk about underrated camps, guys. We always talk about ATT. We always talk about Sanford MMA. South Florida gets a lot of love. But we can talk about some of these other gyms and some of these other guys and where they come from. Because I'll tell you something. There's a reason Belal Muhammad's won a lot of these fights. Yair Rodriguez, ever heard of him? He moved to the States to train with these guys too. Valley Flow Striking Academy in Chicago, Illinois. Juliana Pena, ever heard of her? I know she's not the greatest fighter on planet Earth, but they can teach you how to win a cage fight. Oh boy, yes they can. Sometimes it's about being tougher. Sometimes it's about wanting it more. We saw that Amanda Nunes and Juliana Pena, when they both want it as bad, it's not even competitive, right? Amanda beat the absolute tar out of her. But when it came down to grit and toughness and who wanted it better, and Amanda hadn't been pushed in a while, well, then it was Juliana's title for a while, right? Valley Flow Striking Academy is not to be slept on. They're touching gold, right? They're getting after it. This guy, Belal Muhammad, say anything you want about the guy, except that he hasn't put in the time, the effort, and in ways that most guys don't, right? A lot of guys get 4 or 5 quick knockouts in succession. So they get fast track to the title. long before they're ready. And, they dare until themselves, right? And we don't want to make that an adjective. We hope that he comes back and has a great recovery. But, he went from being a title contender to a very forgettable guy, a guy that was just not competing with elite guys anymore, and certainly not at the level he wanted to when he left the UFC. So I think that that's something that we have to be very weary of. It's just discounting a guy like Belal Muhammad, who did it the hard way, who did it by going back and avenging losses like Vicente Luque, right? He didn't get this proximal positioning on a UFC card because he's very, well liked in UFC back offices, although that doesn't hurt, and he is friends with John Anik. But when you just talk about the work the guy's put in, he's just beaten a lot of guys in a row. He's done a lot of hard assignments. He's just said yes to a lot of fights, and he keeps going out there and he keeps winning. And most of the time it's over 15 minutes. So he works the whole time, 15 minutes, hard to try and get wins. He's a dog. He is a dog. And I think that Belal Muhammad is a winner. So that's not a guy I love betting against. On the other side, Gilbert Burns is a fantastic fighter. I think he's better everywhere. I think he's a more powerful striker on the feet. I think in that way he's more effective. I think Belal probably a little bit more savvy, a little bit more technical. But you just see the power, the imposition that Gilbert puts on people to the strikes is different. And when we're talking about, the wrestling, the grappling, I think Gilbert's better at that too. So how do I think he could lose this fight? I mean, I think he could get outpaced. I think he could get outworked. I think he can get outpositioned at times. But overall, I find it hard to pick against Gilbert here because Belal's best skills has always been leaning back on that pressure wrestling, that pressure grappling, that coming forward game. And I just don't know how you do that against Gilbert. I think that'd be really tough. Khamzat Chimaev went to take Gilbert Burns down, and then halfway to the ground, he was like, Jesus Christ, what am I doing? Or excuse me, he would not say that. He just panicked, right? And he's like, I'm getting out of here. But full aboard of the mission. Pull out both arms, run away, right? He did not want anything to do with Gilbert once they started grappling. Why is that? Is it because Gilbert is some slut? No, it's because Gilbert is lethal. He's very dangerous. If you start messing around on the ground with the guy, he will put you in bad positions and break something. He'll tear you apart. Gilbert's dangerous. So unless you have him dog tired already, do you want takedowns against Gilbert Burns? I just don't know that you do. Shout out to the chat here. We got my guy Brisbane77. I think this is Billy Briz. I hope so. He says, Belal has great fight IQ, watches a lot of tape. That being said, it's tough to say he has any advantage in his striking or grappling. My brother, I could not agree with you more. That's funny. Belal needs to wrestle against Luque and a few fighters to get a win. True. Here it's not going to be easy to take Burns down. Correct. Burns cracks. You are not lying. Belal been KO'd cold before. Yes. Here's the thing. When Vicente Luque was going to fight Belal Muhammad, do you know what I thought? I thought he's going to knock this guy out again. The left hook Larry, the death dealer of 170 pounds. Yo, Belal changed this guy. He broke his confidence a little bit, right? He didn't have the same level of confidence to go out there against Jeff Neal. I thought that was a problem, right? He didn't have the same willingness to commit to his shots, looked a little bit more hesitant, a little bit more weary. All it was a switch in stance from Belal Muhammad, just switching stances on him negated Luque's whole game, really shut him down. And those are the things that you get from being a judicious studier of tape. Belal just figured out exactly, no, I can't go out there and do anything about the fact that I already got knocked out by this guy, but I could just figure out exactly how you beat a guy like this. And then he did. He put out a perfect game plan over the rounds, and he maximizes the skills he does have. Can you not say that? He leverages every ounce of skill that he's been given for the best possible outcome. That's what makes Belal Muhammad special. He has squeezed every drop out of what he has. So God bless him for it. I mean, he just works really hard. So I think it's a really hard fight to call on paper, because I think the one guy I would favor in the first round is Gilbert Burns. I think there's nothing that Belal can do to him really when he's fresh. But can I see Belal Muhammad pacing this guy down? Yeah, I could see that. So here's the other thing, though. Gilbert Burns, his last fight, said that he was in the best shape of his life. got, he looked like he was going fine for the 15 there, for the most part. So I will revisit tape. I got to do so much more due diligence before I, make anything official on these. But, in the early going, I have to think that Gilbert is a little bit better of a fighter. But again, I'm not rushing to the window with that information, because I know that Belal Muhammad's a winner. He's a freaking winner. And those guys, bet against those guys at your own peril. Like, the guy's been an underdog every time, right? So the market can't help you. It's not like the market knows this guy like the back of their head. No, the market gets this guy wrong every time, right? It's like that's what the market does with this guy. They think he sucks, and then he wins. So I know that we all, like, if you're in the comments like, bro, I can't believe it. We think he's good. But shout out to my guy, Fight Talk Only. He's always tuned into it. BJJ versus wrestling in both the main event and the co-main event. You know it to be true, my man. We got a black belt assassin, Aljamain Sterling, taking on a wrestling gold medalist in Henry, the Messenger, Cejudo. And then we've got Belal, remember the name, Muhammad, a wrestler, tried and true, trying to take on our guy, Gilbert Burns. Jiu-Jitsu just had a banner night, let me tell you. Right? Y'all must have forgot about Caio Barajo and how dangerous he is on the ground. Shout out to Lord Mihal Olegzashuk. That guy will be back. He's a stud, fun fighter, always puts on an entertaining banger, but he's got about 2 rounds of gas. If you want to do just jiu-jitsu, he's got about 2 rounds of gas in him. But he performed ably. Cody Brundage, the guillotine that will live in infamy. Everybody gives some love to Cody Brundage, man. The guy's very down on himself. Everybody's being rude to him, being mean to him. Was it a great decision? No. Can you blame somebody for making a bad decision in the heat of battle? Nope. We've seen worse. We've seen way dumber decisions. And so I think that Cody Brundage, I've never, been the biggest Cody Brundage guy, but I'm never a guy to kick a guy while he's down. He put Adolfo Vieira on his ass, and Adolfo had to fight for his life. Said, I didn't think I was going to win that fight. Midway through round 1, I thought it was over and I was going to lose. And he had to find a way to be gritty and get it back. So Jiu-Jitsu stood tall last week. Can it stand tall this week? Yet to be seen. Although I will mention, black belt Ricky Simone did get that ass whooping from, I believe, a blue belt in Song Yadong. But Song Yadong knows how to wrestle, right? He was able to stop a lot of the takedowns. So this is a common dynamic in MMA, but this is why we got to talk about it, right? And Song Yadong, he had the better striking. He had the better counter wrestling. And that was, in the end, all he needed. It didn't matter if he, knew, a wrist lock and where to, position himself on the back and S mount and all these kind of fancy things. Like, sometimes it's about who's in the better position, right? I just didn't let you get on top of me and hold me down, So then it's going to be harder to do jiu-jitsu on me. This is why you got to know all aspects of fighting. I love jiu-jitsu, but if somebody is going to shoot you, right, jiu-jitsu is not going to do goddamn shit for you. Right. So you have to know the limitations of all of the skills, right? All the skills. I think that the next fight is a fight that a lot of people are going to write off the skills of one fighter. And I think they're going to do it unjustly. We're talking, of course, about Jessica Andrade and Yan Xiaonan. I think Yan Xiaonan is criminally underrated. I bet 4 units on her in her last fight. At plus 200 against Mackenzie Dern. Mackenzie Dern, we're talking about one of the best women's grapplers, period. That's what she was. Dominating tournaments, winning in the gi. It's like, she is a very, very skilled Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. And she had dominant positions at times and was not able to get the finish. So I think what makes this fight so compelling is both of these women are excellent stand-up fighters. I thought Marina Rodriguez arguably lost, right? Just telling you the truth. I thought Marina Rodriguez lost to Yan Xiaonan. So I was stunned to see the odds that we got on her against Mackenzie Dern, who I thought was a step, back in competition a little bit. So as far as I, think about this fight, I think Jessica is fantastic. She's a wonderful fighter. One of my most profitable fighters of all time, for sure. Definitely on the women's side. I made a lot of money betting Jessica Andrade. But the same is true of Yan Xiaonan. And I think that a lot of people have been with me on the Jessica Andrade train because she's been a favorite because she has been, shout out to my guy, Jimmy the Drunk, an absolute freaking blessing, my man. Dropped a dono in the chat. Always stop my thought. Says, Liam out here putting in the work, and the books looks like they have never been opened. Oh, brother, it depends on the book, my man. This one I have read through. This one I have read bits and pieces, and you can see got my highlights and annotations, but there's plenty more to read. This is a book, actually, and one day, guys, if you would be interested in me talking about more about books and stuff like that, because it is something I really enjoy, but I know not everybody cares, so I don't always bring it here to talk about. But if you guys want me to talk more about these books, review some of the books, talk about good martial arts books that I like, some books that maybe, if I had it over to do again, maybe I wouldn't buy it, that kind of thing. If you guys want me to talk about that, I'd be more than happy to one day. So please drop that in the comments below. If that's something that you'd like, use my man Brisbane's comment. If you'd like to see me talk about whether it's the books on this shelf, full disclosure, I have a bookshelf over here to my left that has, 400 more books. I would think. So I'm a big book guy. I like books. So if you guys want to talk about some of these, I'd be more than happy to. This book I received as a Christmas present. It's one of the fun. If you like Chael Sonnen, right? If you watch the Chael Sonnen YouTube channel and everything, this book reads like Chael. It's a book of Chael, and it's very funny. If you like Chael Sonnen's mannerisms, I would highly, highly, highly recommend The Voice of Reason, a VIP Path to Enlightenment. Absolutely phenomenal book for Chael fans. It's funny. And I laughed out loud continuously while reading certain parts of it. And he also opens up on some pretty interesting stories. So shout out. And Mel says, Liam, I'm guessing you're on Jan. So that's the thing. I haven't decided, right? I do let my research be a little bit of a guide, but just my gut feeling here, because I'm on Twitter, right? So I do see, I try and keep a pretty broad swath. I have MMA fans. I have MMA bettors. I have, MMA media. And everybody's talking about this is an easy Jessica Andrade bounce back spot. My gut reaction was the opposite. I was like, man, they did her no favors. They're like, hey, let's deal from the bottom of the deck. Erin Blanchfield on short notice at 125. Ding, ding. That's a terrible fight for Jessica Andrade. If you guys watch this show, you heard me talk about why. New York and New Jersey taught them how to wrestle once again. BJJ black belt, very dangerous, Erin Blanchfield. Like, extremely dangerous. I told people, and they thought I was crazy, that it would be a limit bet if we're talking about her versus Valentina, before Valentina lost that fight to Grasso, because now the lines would never be the same. But I bet on Alexa Grasso, right? And if you guys don't believe me, go back and watch the shows. They're out there. All this stuff has been on the channel, so you guys can go back and revisit when those fights took place. But Alexa Grasso, we talked about why we'd bet her on the show. I feel like Jessica Andrade is so good. So when she's going to fight somebody that doesn't need to be around no more, that doesn't have great durability, if she fights somebody even that's just prone to making mistakes, she can, that's for Erin Blanchfield, by the way, shout out, New York, New Jersey represent. But when we're talking about why Jessica Andrade gets overrated at times, it's because she's not seen for the fact that when she's not winning the fight, she normally loses and loses it inside the distance, right? It's not normally like she's winning or something and then, something goes sideways later. It's like she's either having it her way or she loses inside the distance. And I said that about Erin Blanchfield. I bet the Blanchfield and under 2.5 rounds at plus 540. And I was confident in it because Erin Blanchfield, when she gets wins and when she gets finishes, she was tending to do it early on. Barring some fights, where, what's that woman's name? She just narrowly avoided catastrophe again. Brogan Walker, right? Like Brogan Walker almost got finished at the end of round 3, but just, you get my point. Erin Blanchfield, more often than not, when she was getting ladies out of there, she was doing it early. And then on the other side, I just saw Jessica Andrade when she's losing in the first and the second round, like primarily. She kind of has some meme-ish wins along the way. The Nama Yunus win, I mean, it was nice, but that was really a huge mistake from Rose. There was nothing technical or really astute about that. It was very brute. It was very physical. She's very strong, but it was kind of meme-ish. And then the way she lost the title, I mean, want to talk about meme-ish, she just held her chin up in the air and just got knocked out brutally. Like, Jessica doesn't always make great decisions inside the octagon. Doesn't always make great decisions with her career. Now she gets beat by Erin Blanchfield. No problem there. But wants to get right back in there really quick. That could be a little bit of a cause for concern. I feel like Xiaonan could have made significant improvements since her last fight. Not a little bit more time in between. And what has she been doing in her last few fights? I feel like she's just been working on her grappling. That's what I feel like she's been working on, getting better at her grappling. Because she got audited by Carlos Barza. She got exposed. That's fair. That happens to prospects, especially guys when we're talking about international prospects. How often have we seen, and I don't mean this as a disrespect, I'm just talking about like MMA is the ultimate case study for just stuff that works. And we have seen many, many times people come in with international wrestling that is not of the level of the, now I'm not talking about high level, like Yoel Romero, he's an Olympic medalist. No, not that. I'm talking about just people from a normal wrestling background, from dominant Olympic countries. They're not very good. And the United States just so happens to be a dominant wrestling country. We're very good at it. So by and large, I do think that, Yan Xiaonan was open to getting exposed there. That was just a really tough stylistic matchup. And by the way, I bet her there because I was like, man, if she can outlast Carla, I think she's going to, be able to outgrapple her and do whatever. And she got ran through and she got exposed. But then she moved to Team Alpha Male, like Song Yadong, right? Like other, she moved her life out there for a camp. And I'm going to check back in and see what she's been up to recently. But I feel like Yan Xiaonan has invested in her career. She moved to the U.S., took some real sacrifices. And I feel like for Jessica Andrade, what more does she have to do? I mean, she's won the titles. She goes out there and makes a lot of money, win or lose, right? A pretty decent show fee, I'm sure, at this stage of her career, especially after she takes the short notice fight where she's probably going to get jobbed. It's like, yeah, they probably gave her some good coins for that. She's, how long does she want to stick around doing this? Looking at her record just off the top, 24-10, 10 losses. And you guys are saying it's impossible for her to lose. I know some of those are at bantamweight. Granted, some of those are at flyweight. Okay. 115. She's only lost to the best girls. That's fair. I think that's fair. But what have we seen from Yan Xiaonan? She's been improving. She's been showing herself to be relevant among contenders. Again, split decision with Marina Rodriguez. Thought it could have went her way. She's showing she could be competitive with these women. And it's not like Jessica Andrade every time that she has a grappling advantage goes out there and uses it. She'll bang it out on the feet. That's what she likes to do. She likes to get right in your face and swing it out. So I think that WW makes a great point. Jan's grappling has improved, and Andrade is nowhere near the wrestler of Esparza. So I think it's a 3-round striking battle. I think that's fair to say. I think that my guy Moy's audio says Chinese grappling, he's not sold on. We have seen examples. Again, the UFC is a test case. We've seen examples where it was critically underdeveloped. Their grappling and jiu-jitsu game from, other parts of the world that don't have as developed roots in MMA. But we're seeing improvements there. We're definitely seeing improvements, and we're seeing investment from the UFC. I always tell people, pay attention to the business. Pay attention to what the UFC cares about. The UFC cares about improving grappling and improving, the quality of fighting that they're getting from China, because it's a big potential market from them. So they're investing in UFC Shanghai, and they're investing in projects. They just featured Song Yadong in a main event, right? They have been trying to do this over time, and it's a good idea. It's a good business plan for them. So, whatever you make of it. But I think that overall, Yan Xiaonan is This is a great point for Mel, and this is what we're trying to talk about. Experience. Yan is 33 and has been in the UFC longer than Wei Li. And when she came to the UFC, all the talk was about Wei Li against Yan Xiaonan for who is the best Chinese prospect. Shout out to our guy, Best Fight Picks. He talks about this constantly, and he's right. The talk was who's the best prospect. And then we've seen Yan Xiaonan had some setbacks, whereas Wei Li Zhang has gotten to the title. She's gotten the big opportunities. I think that would be a huge marketable fight. What if they put it in China? That would be a big fight. So I would not discount that possibility. I would not dispel that possibility. Shout out to our guy Moy's Audio says, only way Yan wins here is if she cuts angles and throws straight like Blanchfield. We'll see, brother. We'll see. Great banter in the comments. So appreciate you guys. Make friends in the chat. Make friends, everybody be cool to each other, but appreciate y'all. Next up, we've got Movsar Evloev taking on Thug Nasty, Bryce Mitchell. Tough scenes for Bryce Mitchell in his last fight. I'm a little bit surprised to see him get back in there so soon. Let me take a look at how recently that was. Yeah, December, 5 months. He got hit in bad ways. Bad ways against Ilia Topuria. Excuse me. Well, Mel asks, have I noticed Yan getting tired a little? I don't know about that, because Yan, in the last couple of fights, the fight with Dern, right, was the main event. It was 5 rounds, I believe. So this is going to be a 3-round contest. I wouldn't assume she'd get tired over 3. I didn't think she got tired in round 3 against Marina, but I'll go back and revisit. I think Marina might have found her timing in round 3, but I'll have to revisit the tape because honestly, I just can't remember off the top of my head. But Bryce Mitchell, prior to that Ilia Topuria fight, he was on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fight win streak in the UFC. So that's an interesting note, He beat Tyler Diamond by majority decision after losing via rear naked choke to Brad Katona on The Ultimate Fighter. So Brad Katona, I think he's back on The Ultimate Fighter. Shout out to Brad Katona. Yeah, I think the Cuban Assassin actually makes a good point. We'll wade back into the Andrade talk here just for a second. He says this is Jessica's 4th fight in just over a year, and she looked tired and spent in February, right back into camp. Yikes. I tend to agree. She did not take a ton of damage in the Blanchfield fight, but even there, they were thrown down in that first round. It wasn't really a wrestling fight. So, yeah, I think that's a great point. Be interesting to see how recovered she looks. I want to see how she looks this fight week because it's not even just a 125-pound fight, right? It's a 115-pound fight. So she's got to cut weight in addition to everything else. So I think that's a great point. Shout out to the Cuban Assassin. I think that's a new name in the chat. But if not, I really appreciate you being back. Elijah Medina says, I have a feeling Bryce is going to be smoked. That Topuria beating changed him. He was even talking about retiring after that fight. Yeah, man, it could be a real confidence shaker because we're in the ass-kicking business. And, at the end of the day, he got his ass kicked in such a thorough way that it's not like most fighters rationalize like, oh yeah, if I just hadn't slipped on that banana peel, if I just hadn't done this, that's what you need. Again, credit to Luke Thomas. He's talked about fighters have an element of delusion. You kind of need it. Sam Sheridan, the guy who wrote this book, he talks about some fighters are like almost crazy with the level that they take this stuff to. But that's what it needs to be at the very apex. These guys that are insane competitors, they need to justify, rationalize any kind of loss and all this stuff. And shout out to my guy VB because he says Ilia took his soul and made me rich. Yeah, it was a pretty predictable fight in the end in some ways where I thought, who was going to outlast the other was really what was interesting to me. Because again, Ilya has to be the favorite because who do I think is going to win round one? That's a question you always got to ask yourself. Live markets are there for a reason, right? They can price out some of these things over time, but who's going to win round one? Ilya Topuria is who's going to beat that guy in round one right now? Who's going to beat that guy in round one right now? I don't know. I don't know about it. That's a really tough thing to predict. That guy is hard to imagine beating right now in the first round of a fight. Jai Herbert arguably did, but kind of in a meme-like fashion, right? You'd have to hurt him, right? That's basically the only way, I think, to cleanly win a round off. This guy is so competitive in the wrestling and the grappling right now. And he, especially when he's got full energy, he's very fast in the scrambles. He's got huge power. It was a terrible fight for Bryce Mitchell. And I think that, Billy's making the point, and I think it's true. Bryce's confidence looks broken. Evloev stuffs a couple takedowns. Bryce is probably fucked. The one thing I'll say is this. Everybody loves Evloev this week, it looks like. So I want to see some, dissenting opinions. I'm going to be a little bit polite and judicious, but we could call a spade a spade. It's only just me and some close friends, 68 of us at 1:35 in the morning. I need some squares to come in the other way before I'd feel good about betting it. But to tell you the truth, Bryce Mitchell seems like a guy who has regional appeal. He does the farm gimmick. He does some fun stuff, but he also says things that are insane, right? And that's not good for the UFC, which is a Disney company, which is trying to brand themselves and stuff. Is there any wonder why he's fighting foreign guys that are like the toughest guys to beat in the division right now that no one wants to fight? It's like the UFC is not dealing him, easy matchups. They're kind of dealing him from the bottom of the deck. So I just want to make that clear. But then let's paint the picture of the Evloev side from a negative, right? If we were going to try and poke holes in the resume first, because everybody's natural inclination will be to support him. And that's not wrong. But we just have to talk about, this is part of my process. I try and poke holes. I try and be a contrarian. I try not to go along. If everybody agrees on something, I almost just want to, keep my distance. Even if I don't play it, I don't want to be on the side of everybody when it comes to betting. That's just something that's superstitious about me, right? Sometimes the public wins. I just don't like being a part of it, right? I feel dangerous when I do that. Yeah, VB says Bryce can probably take down Evloev and hold him down. Never mind. Tough sell. And that's a good point, right? But here's what I will say. The reason I thought Bryce had any hope nor prayer of beating Ilya Topuria, and truthfully, in my heart of hearts, I didn't think he had a great chance. But I just felt like Ilya had showed signs that he could slow down over time. I felt like Bryce was real tough, right? He's had a saw go through his nuts and all this terrible stuff. And I think he showed that in that fight. He's tough. He just got shit kicked, right? He had no defense. He had nothing to offer defensively. And so he's getting beat up real bad. And Movsar's probably going to do a lot of beating him up in this fight. But, yeah, and again, to the point of the Cuban assassin, I do think you're right. He says Bryce Mitchell's damaged good. He trains at a small gym that hasn't really evolved. That's true. There's no plan B if he cannot get the takedown. It's just sloppy striking on the feet. But think back to Hakeem Dawodu, right, who, he's been having some tough times in the UFC lately. Hakeem Dawodu starts walking this guy down and hurting him real bad. People were sharing that clip on Twitter. I'll have to find it and repost that. But he was hurting him real bad in round 3. And Movsar was running. He was backing up. He knew that if he engaged, he was in real trouble in round 3. Now, I don't think that Bryce is even close to as dangerous on the feet as somebody like Hakeem Dawodu. Let's be very clear about that. But I do feel like Evloev kind of blew his wad and was hanging on for dear life, trying to run away from this guy because he was tired. I feel like the reason his defense was starting to fall off is because he was tired. And if Bryce was able to make this a 3-round affair, I think he would become live, but I would never consider a pre-bet at all on the Bryce Mitchell side. 0%. I can't do it. Not after the last showing. Would have to see a lot of improvements. Would have to see a lot of changes, a lot more discipline, and I haven't seen that. Last I checked on his social media, he's still out there farming. So God bless him for it. He does things his own way. You can't say nothing else. If he gets to win, you'd have to just salute him for being a freaking renegade individual. But I don't think his skills rate here against Movsar. I think Movsar is just better at MMA. And I think Bryce is being dealt right from the bottom of the deck. One too many flat earth things and Joe Biden this and whatever the hell else that. If you just keep it to political rhetoric, they'll probably let you go. But you start going completely off the reservation, and I think the UFC was like, yo, this is like a brain trauma lawsuit waiting to happen. We got to get this guy onto a farm and out of here as fast as possible. They're dealing him a little bit from the bottom of the deck. After he had a good win streak going, it was no soft landing, right? You take the loss. It's not like, hey, let's build you back up. Let's give you somebody easier. No, let's give you somebody who's also a beast that we're trying to book against Ilia Topuria. Shout out to our guy Moyes dropping knowledge in the tidbits. Movsar Evloev's brother took Olympic gold in the 2020 Greco-Roman Olympics. Yeah, different level of athlete. Same thing that happened with Topuria, man. Different level of athlete. But I do think, that would be an interesting fight. Those two guys together, Ilia Topuria, Movsar Evloev, maybe they get together after this fight. What do you think? Oh, shit. Mel's got a narrative. I'm a narrative guy, too. I don't ignore narratives. I'll consider those. So shout out. National Gardening Day on Saturday. Farmers winning. Bryce and Andrade. Shout out to Mel. He's got a narrative. Talk me into it. Last time I saw his social media, he was riding a bike cross country or something like that. Anybody see that? He looked like he was possessed for real. I did not see that, but that is awesome, man. I feel like I've seen it now that you described it to me. We got my man Billy says, Bryce did drop Edson nonetheless. Man, I think Edson is truthfully chinny, and I think our guy Billy Quarantillo just unfortunately got put out of there a little bit too early to get it done, man. I thought he was fighting the exact game plan I wanted to see from him, and he still died. So, all credit to Billy the Squid. He'll be back, but New York's own had to fall in that one. I think that Bryce, that was a good showing from him. But again, I feel like Billy didn't have the same threat on the ground. He's a little bit more, I'll take you down. And then when you stop getting up, I'll submit you, right? But I feel like a guy like Bryce Mitchell is a lot more, I take you down and I dominate from second one to the end. And if he's stronger than you, he does that. And that's the other thing about him is, Bryce does some things technical, but really he's just a freakishly strong individual. He's an insanely strong guy. Doesn't look it, right? He doesn't look like a physique guy. But I'm telling you, again, this is something I know from wrestling. It's not always the guy with the crazy strapping muscles and the physique that always feels the strongest when you're out there. I went against this kid who had a cradle that just was so hard to break the cradle. I had to, pull at the grip both sides, like ripping it, whatever, try and turn sideways, kick with both legs. This kid just had an insane grip. And on top of that, right, I was feeling him in the head, but he's so strong, man. And I asked him afterwards, I ended up getting the win, Lord willing. I mean, it was barely, right? Squeaked one out, ended up getting the fall late. But then I'm in the back talking to this guy after the fact. And I said to him, I was like, dude, what do you do? You're so strong. Like, how did you get that strength like that? He said, man, I roof with my father. I roof. Or I do like manual labor, physical, just doing physical shit. He was one of the strongest people I've ever felt to this day. I've wrestled with college guys. I've wrestled with very good wrestlers, jiu-jitsu guy, all of them. He was one of the strongest individuals I've ever felt to this day. And all he did was just do a lot of manual labor from a younger age. He is extremely, extremely strong physically. I think that Bryce Mitchell, that's the thing that has gone underreported about him in the past. It's just he doesn't look like he's as strong as he is. But, he didn't get here for no reason. He didn't win all those fights for no reason. He is a freak physically. Yeah, and point, proven right there for my guy, VB. Shout out. And again, I just have to say thank you to all the really sharp heads that have pulled up tonight. It's a pleasure discussing these fights, especially when you got such sharp people to bounce ideas off of. So thank you guys for being here. Ngannou, same exact thing. The salt mines of Cameroon produced a freaking world champion, right? A championship contender before he even learned all the basics, before he learned all the wrestling and the techniques. He's just such a freak physically. And so if Movsar wasn't a freak physically, I would think Bryce has a better chance, but he kind of is, right? He comes from Olympic stock, like we just heard from our guy Moyes, a great tidbit that you probably only get on this show. So these are the things that, it's difficult to count out somebody like Bryce, but after that last performance and after what we've seen, you just can't bet on him pre-fight here, in my humble opinion, unless this line blows out insanely. So, yeah, my gut read here would be Evloev is being set up for success, and Bryce Mitchell not so much. But again, for our narrative homies out there, they could move to the same record with a win and a loss. So something to keep in the back of the mind there. Next up, we've got a weird one, right? This doesn't feel like it fits in the middle of the card. It's just kind of like placed in there on the end of the main card. But I can tell you the reason we are assembled, in my humble opinion, is not for Charles Jourdain. I do think it is for Kron Gracie, who is the underdog in this contest. So that's what's interesting, right? I feel like Charles Jourdain's been on fight nights, right? He's been just a guy to the UFC a little bit, right? He's throwing them to the wolves. Shane Burgos to get jobbed out in New York. I mean, cash me a nice ticket. That was a really dicey fight. That was very close. It was within the margins. That was a fight where I had to take some stock. I was like, man, is Charles Jourdain better than I thought? And then I bet him against Nathaniel Wood. Boy, that was a mistake. That guy was terrible against Nathaniel Wood. I just thought it was a shameful performance. No volume, no striking, no skills, no nothing. It was really bad. Shout out to my guy. Contender View says, worst fighter, Belbita or Maria Oliveira? Bro, I don't even know enough about each of them to say. I would think, Spider Girl Oliveira is pretty not so good. But Belbita's pretty ineffective. I feel like Belbita's a nice girl. I feel like she's a very nice girl, but I feel like she's got to get a little bit more of that killer instinct, a little bit more violent intensity in order to compete at a high level. So you know what? We'll go Belbita reluctantly, but I think she's active on Twitter. So God bless her, and I hope she's well. I think she's a fine fighter. Wish her the best. War Crone says, my guy Furio, he's got a side. He's got a rooting interest already. Shout out to Felipe Rocha, says Movsar Bryce originally got booked. It was lined to pick him. That's a fact, but I think public perception has changed, and that could be recency bias, but it also could be, other people taking stock of recent performances and those kind of things. So it's fascinating, though. Great point. I think that's a great point. Ton of money coming in on Kron. Can't blame people when Jourdain can't stop takedowns. Yeah, tend to agree. I think that this is a great point, though, by VB. Gracie been out 4 years. Reasons unknown at 30. Now 34, coming for a paycheck. But Jourdain's wrestling sucks. You ain't lying, brother. You hit all the points on the head there. Reminds me of Gaethje versus Fiziev opening as a pick'em and Fiziev getting insta-steamed. Yeah, and to be honest with you, I agreed with this theme, and I thought that he won the fight. That's the way this game goes sometimes. I thought it was a close fight. I thought Gaethje obviously beat the hell out of him at various points there, right? Rocked him. I just thought that the overall totality of the way that fights are scored, just round by round, I thought he won 2 rounds to 1. But such is life. Now, this is a fight where, I think that the points that VB makes, they're very valid, man. It's hard to cap this fight. Kron Gracie, he didn't look great in the UFC, but he did show himself to be very, very talented with his grappling. And when he's able to implement it, he's extremely, lethal. But when he's not, he's kind of just swanging and banging on the feet, not very sophisticated stylistically. Charles Jourdain will beat the shit out of him if it's just a pure stand-up fight, you'd have to think. But he's never really had a pure stand-up fight that I can remember. Like almost anybody that wants to grapple with this guy gets to grapple with this guy for any length of time, really. He's had a real hard time enforcing his will in fights. I don't think he's very physically strong. So a lot to think about here, because our guy WW points out Kron is not an American. Bet the MMA fighter here in Jourdain, not the BJJ nerd. I mean, I'm a sucker for a good BJJ nerd, bro. But yeah, I mean, Jourdain is much more active, right? And he's been fighting studs. That's the other thing about Jourdain in a lot of ways. Nathaniel Wood, maybe I didn't give him the credit he deserved. Maybe he's better than I thought he was, right? Especially up at 145. Maybe that's different. Maybe that makes a difference for him. I don't know. That's something I have to think about. It's something I have to consider. Got to go back and rewatch it, by the way. I watched that one in a bar in Iceland, I think. So didn't really give it the full frame of mind. So for me, it's really tricky, man. I think it'd be hard for the average bettor to get behind Kron Gracie. I think that's a good point by Furio here. He says Jourdain might be a square side this week. He might be. But then on the other side, I feel like bettors have been getting burnt with Jourdain. I feel like there might be some recency bias going against him as well, because he has been just shit in the bed a little bit, right? He's just been, dropping the ball when you think he's going to come through for you as a dog or whatever it is. So I feel like this is a really important fight for him, for Charles Jourdain. In terms of where he's at in the division, what would this be? 3 straight losses for Jourdain if he comes up short here? So this is probably a guy whose back's going to be against the wall. He's going to be in a big motivation spot. But I think that fight doesn't go to decision is a parlay piece, says Billy Briz. He says someone's getting finished. Let's be real. I mean, you'd have to think. I can't really push back on that. I mean, Jourdain by knockout is probably going to be a popular play. If you're on the Jourdain side, I think that's his best chance. But could you see Kron Gracie kind of gritting it out through some damage and getting to a 15-minute scorecard? I mean, I wouldn't rule that out. Let's see what else we got here in the chat. They need Canadian fighters to win for the Canada card. Haha. Yo, shout out to our girl, Jamie Lynn Horth. Got the dub. Mentioned on the show. Thought she was going to get the win. Ended up gritting it out, getting the decision there. First decision win of her career. Close fight. Fought up a weight class. Did it on short notice. Couldn't get a fight on the regional scene. Now she's in the UFC. I think that girl is for real going to win some fights at 125. So watch that space with Jamie Lynn Horth. I think she's a really talented fighter. But, Canadian fighters overall, boy, betting them is a losing proposition long-term, eh? Except for Mike Malott. Shout out Mike Malott. That guy's just been shipping people to the underworld with bad intentions in the first round. So shout out to him. He's doing great things. Shout out to my guy, Chad N. Hellinger, right? There's a lot of great Canadian fighters. But, it's just it's inconsistent sometimes, the level of MMA. And I feel like Jourdain is a good fighter, but he's just had a real hard time breaking through and finding that next gear. And maybe that's an athleticism ceiling. Maybe he just can't overcome that. He looks like he works hard and does a lot of the right things. Maybe he's not in the best training environment. I have to double check where he's been training at. Lupita is on the Canadian women's wrestling scene, her sister. So, yeah, you're right about that. Mexican-Canadian for sure, but absolutely. People will underrate Horth based on this fight as well. Dude, don't even tell them that because you're so right. I'm kidding. But, yeah, you're right. I mean, people are going to underrate Jamie Horth moving forward because Haley Cowan isn't good and, whatever. But the whole truth of it is context is everything. Context is everything in fighting. And what Jamie Lynn Horth normally brings to the table at 125, she's really disciplined. She can out-wrestle people. She's very physically strong. And she's a dog. She's durable. So she take a shot. If she gets hit, gets hurt, she gets back up and keeps fighting. And she gets taken down. She gets back up to her feet right away and starts pushing the action on you. And you saw those same elements in this fight with Haley Cowan, but they were just a little bit less explosive, and it didn't lead to the finish like she probably would have hoped because, Haley Cowan's big and she's very strong. It was hard to get her off her in the clinch and those kind of things, which I mentioned. I said the only way Haley Cowan wins this fight, in my humble opinion, and it was my humble opinion, is a split decision. I was like, she's going to have to push her into the fence, hope for the best, roll on top of her or something. Like, I just did not see her controlling Jamie Lynn Horth and outlanding her with better strikes and better shots. I couldn't get there. So that was my only money line bet last week, and I normally am not a guy who likes betting on debutantes, but it was debutante versus debutante. Somebody had to damn win. And I was like, Jamie Lynn Horth is just a better fighter. She's got better skills, and that was borne out at the end of the day. So shout out to my guy J-Bone. Let's hear what he has to say. He says, I saw the top comments on UFC signed Jourdain to a new 75 and 75 contract. Not sure how accurate that is. I mean, that's a lot of money to pay a guy to lose fights. So interesting. But yeah, maybe they're just feeling like they're getting a discount. They're like, yeah, we'll tell him it's 150, but if we just keep giving him losses, then then we only got to pay the 75. Billy says, give that money to Cedric Doumbé. Jimmy says, I'm old enough to remember when Rory wasn't horrible at fighting. Oh, and our guy GSP. Yo, Rory McDonald, shout out, my favorite fighter of all time in a lot of ways. Rory McDonald, I think he was in the best fight of all time against Robbie Lawler. That second fight between those two guys, just unbelievable. One of my favorite fights ever. So just fantastic fighter, fantastic human being, proves that MMA, it's just the reason I love that fight is because it's such a reminder. It's a reminder of the fact that you could give everything and do everything right, and this sport will kick you right in the nuts and just break your heart. Wrestling's the same way, man. Everybody leaves wrestling with a broken heart in some way, because you never did quite as much as you thought you could or wanted to or whatever. I feel like most people, unless you get the world and Olympic championships, there's a handful of people like that, but most people are heartbroken by it. In some small part of that, it's not a huge thing, but it's something that, it'll get you. And I feel like it pushes guys to success in MMA. I mean, think about the guys that we know that have used their failures in wrestling to compel them to MMA success. Daniel Cormier could never get the championship. He's always stuck behind Cael Sanderson. He's always stuck behind this guy. He couldn't get that Olympic title. It just eluded him. Wrestling is like that for everybody. And man, Rory McDonald gave everything to beat Robbie Lawler. He landed strike after strike after strike. I still question to myself to this day what kind of superhuman like if Robbie Lawler pissed in a jar that night, it would have lit on fire. And I say salute for him because everybody's doing it. But all jokes aside, Robbie Lawler did inhuman things that night, just taking clean head kicks right to the head over and over and over, no selling them, just walking forward, wobbling a little bit and like a robot, just rebooting and coming back. It is such an unbelievable fight. The momentum swings, and it just tells you the whole human story. Because the other thing is, there is no getting around what fighting is in that fight. Rory, at the end of that fight, is broken. He is a different person. And I say that with all love. He went on to win many fights after titles. He was never the same fighter after that night. Never the same violent guy. It changes you, dude. That, like, people talk about, we're going to war. We're going to stand and bang or whatever. And that is as close as you get in the octagon to something warlike, where he dropped in that fight. And you listen to the interviews, it's harrowing, dude. He says, yeah, man, he punched me, and I just felt that I had no nose. Like, I touched with my hand. I felt I had no nose. And I can't describe the pain. He's like, I just touched where my nose was, and that the pain was it just blacked. I just don't remember anything that happened from there. And if you watch in the fight, he goes like this, and he just falls backwards, sits back and covers up, and he is a crimson mass. It's harrowing. And it is, when at the top level of this stuff, it is two guys fighting for everything with everything. That's MMA at its freaking best, man. So, absolutely fantastic fight. If y'all got Fight Pass, go back and revisit. It holds up any day. In my view, one of the best fights we've ever seen. But the featured prelim is going to try its damn best to overtake it because we've got the steamroller, Matt Frevola, New York's own, and he's taking on a very tough challenge in the Crimson Shin, Drew Dober. This is a fun fight. This is just a fight that's like, if Matt Frevola wasn't from New York, it'd be more fun because I'm worried. I'm always worried for my guy. It's tough, man. It's tough. I feel like Drew Dober, he's not easy to take down and dominate on the ground. But when it happens, when he's being dominated on the ground, it gets ugly quick. I think, shout out to my guy, Billy Britt says, please, God, shoot takedowns here, steamroller. We need some steamroller big time. We need some steamroller takedowns here and quick. Because the thing that is overlooked about Matt Frevola is he's fantastic on the ground. He's very good on the ground. He's taken down a lot of fighters. Jalen Turner, right? Kind of audited him on the ground. Very good fighter, Jalen Turner. Got audited on the ground there. And he had to go back to the drawing board a little bit and improve his jiu-jitsu after that fight. So Matt Frevola, it's not like he doesn't have the skills, but it's just we got to give some credit and respect to Drew Dober and the fact that he's been making improvements. And on the feet, this guy is just money. He's lethal. He can put out anybody. But I think the UFC kind of knows what they're doing here. They're giving Matt, a chance to go out there and put on a fun fight, but have that safety valve. Go out there and get these takedowns and be smart and do something productive in front of your home fans and get that win. I think this is the point. Frevola is an underdog here, easy money. Shout out to Contender View as well for the dono, my man. Just saw that. Absolute blessing, brother. Appreciate you. He says, biggest play on the card, Parker Porter. Bad idea. Let me scroll to that fight for 1 second. On Tapology. Because, guys, I'll just tell you the truth, right? I'm not familiar with Braxton Smith at all. I don't know his game. From what I've heard, all of his fights have ended in the first round, I believe. So if that's true, I think Parker could probably get the win over a guy like that. But I'll tell you the truth, man. Parker is just he's a guy that's been not given, very favorable matchmaking from the UFC. So maybe this is them trying to give him a softball, like, hey, sorry, bro, we didn't mean to do you wrong, with some of these past matchups. But he's just a guy that's kind of tough to book for. He's not in the greatest shape, right? If you give him real athletes at heavyweight, he's going to get hurt in all likelihood pretty badly and probably quick. We saw the Dawkins fight that was on short notice, but it wasn't good. So I think that Parker is a great fighter, and he, I would assume would have a ground advantage against the average heavyweight. He trains in the gi, right? I follow him on social media. He follows me too. Shout out to Parker Porter. Great living American. He's a tough guy. He's a fun guy to root for, American hero, good story. But I got to know more about this Braxton guy before I could tell you the truth. I don't have enough to formulate an opinion here. But Parker Porter being the biggest play of the card, that's very interesting to me. I'd have to think that Braxton's pretty bad to do that. But I wish you the best of luck all the way. Scam the Books says Braxton Smith has some hilarious tape. I'm excited to watch that then. You guys have got me geared up for that. VB says, great breakdowns, bro. That fight was truly amazing. Thank you, my man. I couldn't agree more. No fight I could give a higher endorsement to. If anybody asks my favorite fight, that's always the one I defer to. And I know it's a popular pick, but sometimes people just get it right. And I think that that's the right call. I think it's a great fight. All-time legendary fight at welterweight. Red Fox says Frevola was competitive with Arman. That's a really, really good point. Red Fox, you're looking jacked, my brother. So good work. But I'll tell you what, I think that Frevola, as a wrestler, as a grappler, he's competitive with a lot of guys in this division. He's very good. He trains with the same guys. He does some training with Billy the Squid and Gracie Tampa South, but he's got the Sarah Longo connection, and he gets work with Aljamain Sterling, and he gets work with these guys that are really elite. So counting him out of any fight is definitely foolish. One of the things, if you guys haven't noticed, I don't know the odds for all these fights. Right? The only fight that I know the odds on is actually the main event. That I know, I can take a guess. I might have seen it once when it was posted on Twitter, the opener or something. I saw somebody tweet out a line that they bet, but I haven't looked at the betting odds screen because I don't want to know. I want to, kind of just go into it and flow a little bit more unfiltered. But just my initial impression here is that this should be a pretty closely lined fight. Bobby Green is obviously a very good striker and a good grappler, but not a proactive grappler, not a proactive wrestler. We could see a whole different side of the MMA sphere that we didn't see, in some of these recent fights. Drew Dober, when you engage with him in a fight on the feet, you are trading with fire. You're playing a game with your life. And I think for Frevola, that's the danger here. He's at home, New York, New Jersey, the crowd's going to be going crazy for him. I think he's got to go out there and do it smart. Do a really smart game plan. But then again, what the hell do I know? Because then he goes out there in his other fights and he just knocks people the hell out. So I think the chances of Matt Frevola knocking out Drew Dober are not zero. I'll tell you that. I think people thought Bobby Green had no chance to knock out Drew Dober. I thought he was landing a lot of clean shots. That Crimson Chin will last for some time, but it won't last forever, baby. And that Crimson Chin's been on the line many, many times. I would not be stunned if Matt Frevola was the guy to break that because he's been so maligned on the feet. People talk shit about his game on the feet. I think it lit a fire under him. And he's been coming out here trying to play bully ball with these guys throwing punches, and he's knocked some people the hell out. I just think, that Azaitar guy, he was not expecting Matt Frevola to dink him on the head top over and over. And that's exactly what happened. And he put him down quick. Frevola hasn't had a takedown since 2019 against Luis Pena. Chances of him going for takedowns is slim to none, considering he's won his last two fights by KO. And that's the danger here. Therein lies the danger, my friend. But I do think he's well coached. And I do think those last two fights were fights that he could afford to, be on the feet with those guys, to tell you the truth. I just feel like Azaitar has power, but he's not very technical. And I feel like we saw pretty early on there that Frevola is just a step ahead of him in the striking. I thought he was much faster. This is an interesting one because I do think Drew Dober is pretty fast, but he's also pretty reactive. He starts a little bit slow. Bobby Green was lighting him on fire in round one. From my recollection, and then I went back and rewatched it not too long ago. Bobby Green definitely was whooping his ass in the first round. It was not that close. He was outlanding him by a lot as well. And Frevola, he'll throw some volume. I think that is a path. I think Frevola has every path to victory. Okay, I think he could win a decision. I think he could submit this man, and I think he could knock him out. But that does not mean I think he wins every iteration of this fight. He does have some physical things that could compromise him here in terms of the chin, in terms of just the decision-making. That could be a hindrance, staying in fights in positions where you don't need to be. I think that would be a mistake here. But I think if he fights really smart, I think he's going to do great. I think Frevola, he's been ready to break out a little bit for a while. He's been talking a big game, and this is his opportunity. This is a big fight in front of his home fans. They're setting him up for success. I think he's going to deliver, but it's going to be a hell of a fight. And, stay tuned, guys. Again, these are my leans, right? I come to you with research. I come to you with facts when I come to the show. That's what I try to do. Come armed with real facts and information and breakdowns and analysis. But this is me musing with you. This is me talking through my thoughts. Before I've done all that, this is what I think about these. Going to go a little bit faster on the preliminary portion in the interest of time. And in the interest of just the fact I won't know quite as much about all these fighters. There are some debutantes that we'll talk about, and I don't know them at all. So I truly appreciate everybody rocking with us. We got over 60 people at 2:08 in the morning local time. So I appreciate you guys, and I'm happy to chop it up with you. So let's see what's next here. I'm bringing up Tapology right now, and we'll get it going. So we've got Devin Clark taking on Kennedy Nzechukwu at light heavyweight. Light heavyweight, surprisingly, has been a profitable division for me over time. You know, I feel like it's one of the more volatile divisions in the UFC and all of fighting. But, you know, I don't know why. I just felt like I've had a good read on the division historically. I feel like that read is starting to come undone for me a little bit. You know, Devin Clark's an example. I just can't really get this guy right. You know, I think that I've always thought he stinks, right? Just I never thought, I was never sold on the Devin Clark experiment. But now he's been around for a really long time. You know, he's gotten a lot of UFC experience. And when he doesn't get knocked out, you know, he's a pretty tough guy to beat in some ways. He'll go out there and shoot some takedowns, you know, try and be proactive. He'll try and do the right things. But, you know, I just have never been sold on the Devin Clark experiment. Now, Kennedy and Nzechukwu, you know, it's like, which Kennedy are we talking about? Is it the one that gets hit with one elbow by Dao Jung and we're all fold up shop and it's over here, can't stand up? Or, you know, is it the Kennedy that could take an absolute ass whipping, come back on you? It doesn't matter what you throw at him. He's got the cardio to press for 15 hard minutes. I think that, you know, Kennedy just has a lot of physical attributes that make him hard to deal with, you know, but will it make him hard to wrestle? And that's something I really got to think about, because a lot of these fighters that he's fought, you know, think about an Oldberg, think about these kind of guys that it's more so, I'm going to try and beat you up. I'm going to try and hurt you. I'm going to try and land big strikes. How many guys have been trying to intentionally just go out there and ground him the whole fight, take him down? You know, I think Danilo Marquez, maybe, if I'm like, these are literally off the top of my head. I could even be misremembering. Yeah, he beat Danilo Marquez. I mean, maybe Darko Stosic would have tried to wrestle him. He actually was wrestling Paul Craig and like dominating the fight from top position when he got submitted in that one, if you guys remember. He lost a fight that he probably shouldn't have to Nikolai Negumereanu. That was a little bit puzzling. I bet Negumereanu there. We'll take the money when it comes, but absolutely absurd decision. I think I made that one based on the market, and the market was right for whatever reason that night. But Carl Roberson, he then beat, and Carl is just not UFC level at this stage. I believe he just got arrested for a bank robbery or something. So I don't want to disparage his name. God bless him. I hope everything's well or getting better. But yeah, I think Carl Roberson is long out of the UFC. Iwan Kutalaba, you know, another guy who is pretty spotty and inconsistent. So really, it's hard for me to rate out Kennedy and Nzechukwu and how he's going to do in this fight. But I think that he showed at least a willingness and an ability to deal with some pressure from Iwan Kutalaba. So, you know, I'm not going to rule him out in this fight. I got to go back and tape his wrestling. I don't know enough about it. And certainly, you know, just from a guts and who wants it more and who wants to be there more and who's going to fight for your dollar. I think Kennedy and Nzechukwu actually has a little bit more dog in him, but I don't know, man. I think both of these guys are, you know, skating by a little bit more on athleticism than skills. But Devin Clark, I think, is coached by his father. And Kennedy and Nzechukwu is coached by Saif Sayoud. So, yeah, I'm going to lean with Saif Sayoud there, but it's not a fight I'm really bullish on off the rip. Yeah, this is a great point from our guy, Billy. I'm not saying that they're on the same level of chance of winning by knockout, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that Frevola is not incapable of winning the fight by knockout. But yeah, I would agree. Drew Dober is much more likely to win the fight by knockout. He's a bigger power puncher. And I do agree with my guy Furio. He stands in the pocket a little bit too long at times. I think that, you know, that would be a flaw. But then if he's turning that into wrestling and takedown opportunities, I think it could be to his benefit. So we'll see how he approaches this one. Next up, Khaos Williams taking on Rolando Bedoya. I don't know a Bedoya from a Godoya or a Shadoya. So I would be lying if I said that I knew anything about this fight. I have to look up who Bedoya is and find out more about him. Know that he's a debutant. Khaos Williams, on the other hand, he's a guy that I like. I feel like everybody hates the guy or whatever because he wins by knockout. I feel like in the betting community, it sounds silly, but I feel like in the public community, you win by knockout and you get favored. Everybody likes you. But in the betting community, if you win by knockout, they're suspect of you. They're like, this guy, he secretly stinks. But then he's won decisions and stuff too. I just think Khaos Williams, he's training with, at the time, Murcielago Fight Team. I think now he's at Jackson Wink and he's moved to a couple other, places and gotten better work, just gotten more training, more time in the game. I feel like he really wants to be successful and really cares about his MMA career and invest in it. So this to me seems like a setup, right? You got Rolando Bedoya, a quote unquote bouncy striker with leg kicks, body kicks, decent boxing, similar to Caio Barajo. Oh, very interesting. Well, then I'll have to watch. But yeah, I doubt he can grapple like Caio Barajo coming out of Peru. I'd love to be proved wrong. That would be sick. I don't know much about his game, but sounds like he's a stand-up artist. So yeah, for me, just feels like a fight that's probably being put together for, our guy Khaos Williams to get a crazy start show here. But I am now personally invested because my guy Fight Talk says he's rooting for his Peruvian brother. Let's freaking go. Do you know anything about Rolando? Fight Talk, I'd be curious to know what you got. Yeah, I'd be curious to know what you got, brother. Because if you got some insight on our guy Rolando that we need to know, I would like to. But yeah, our guys from Peru. Who do we got? What is that? Barzola? Where's Barzola from? Now I'm looking up where Enrique Barzola is from. And I think it's Peru, but I could be proved wrong quickly. He's a Peruvian mixed martial artist. Goddamn, Liam. Let's go. So, yeah, I think, he can wrestle. He can put on a decent grappling display. So it's not like that it's impossible to find, but I just think by and large, known a little bit more for the stand-up striking. So, interesting. My guy Furious says, I actually kind of like the Bedoya kid. Level of comp, not great. Khaos isn't someone who I want to lay minus 3XX to win, though. I mean, fair enough. Yeah, I would retort with dude's fists go burr. That's a great point, Billy, and I do agree. Khaos Williams, he hits extremely hard. He's got good low kicks himself. I think people don't always talk about that. And I'd be curious to see if he starts mixing in some wrestling and grappling. Absolutely. Great point. The Peruvian necktie, of course. It's hard to hit. It's hard to pull off, my brother, but when you do, it's oh so sweet. So shout out to Peru, but not the country I first associate with dominant wrestling and grappling. It's not to say that it can't be found there, though. You find pockets of greatness everywhere. So shout out to Peru and shout out to I always love the stories of people that come from a place that maybe doesn't have as many people, doesn't have as many great stories. How about a Conor McGregor, right? Ever heard of him? Ever heard of the book Notorious, written by our guy Jack Slack, another content creator supporting our own here, Jack Slack, the Notorious, right? It's just a story of a simple man from a country, with a couple million people in it. I think less than 10 million people live in Ireland. The diaspora is far larger than the country itself. Yet you have a guy rise up and he could strike and he could do it. But his grappling was what ended up falling short there a little bit. He was trained by the first black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Ireland, and John Danner. John Danner, excuse me, John Kavanaugh. You can tell what hour of the night it is, and I'm drinking water, not coffee. So forgive my misspeaking. Next up, guys, let's talk about the women. Let's talk about the Brazil on Brazil crime. People are telling me there can't be a China versus China fight. Got Brazil on Brazil crime right here. We got Marina Rodriguez taking on Verna Janjidoba. And boy, oh boy, this is a tricky one because Marina Rodriguez, I faded her bigly. With Xiaonan. We talked about that. Or excuse me, not I faded her bigly with Amanda Lemos, is what I meant to say. I thought she lost to Xiaonan, which is why I ended up betting bigly against her. And I felt like Amanda Lemos went from being, an overvalued commodity to an undervalued commodity very quickly, right? I think people are quick to throw somebody out. Oh, they stink. That's it. Cheshire Cat, I do appreciate the donation, but not gonna fully address that one on here. That seems like something that only she could answer for you. But if I had to guess, she seems like someone that cares about appearance. That's what I'll say. So I wish her well. Now, that being said, we can look to the next one here. Oh, Furio wants to clarify the record. He said, oh my God, I had Bedoya mixed up with someone else. Bedoya is awful. Khaos minus 3XX is actually responsible here. Apologies. Fair play, my man. I agree. Remy says worth the $10. God bless. God bless. All money's good money. So I guess whatever the question, no problem. No problem. I think she likes appearances, bro. I think, as far as I'm concerned, Cynthia Calvillo got a 10-8 round and a draw from being so much further ahead of Marina Rodriguez on the ground. I don't know if people understand the grappling levels. I think that's something that people got to take into account. The levels in the grappling. I think that Verna's levels ahead of her. Levels. I think she's much, much better. Girls like Amanda Hebas gave her much credit and respect in terms of her grappling. I'm talking about Verna because she's very good. She can really wrestle. She can really grapple. She's not a great striker, but she's committed to throwing when she throws, and then she tries to grab a holding and get takedowns. I think that Marina, she's got very good long strikes. She's brutal on the feet. She's got good shots. She throws those knees to the body. She knocked out my girl Amanda Hebas that I was just praising. Amanda Hebas, wrestling and grappling, very little you could say detrimentally. Took down and dominated Caitlin Chukagian, brown or black belt in the Henzo system, taking down a bunch of people and dominated on the floor. Janjidoba, that's her bread and butter, man. She's a dominant physical athlete on the ground. She is very good at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I think that she hasn't always leveraged it the best in the UFC, but, I think this could be a winnable fight for her. This could be a fight that brings her into some relevance. But I feel like I kind of am tempted for a fight doesn't go to decision here. I'm just gut leaning with you guys, right? Last week, people were talking about Arosa Padilla. What side do you like? I was like, a side? I was like, I don't know what side's going to win. I know that this fight's not going the distance. That's what I know. And I didn't end up betting it as big as I should because the line didn't move all week. I got scared by the market. Sometimes you got to trust your own gut. People were saying this side or this. I didn't even have a side. My gut just told me this fight would never go to decision. These two guys just wild swanging and banging, like reckless, chins up in the air. Just seems like a fight that's destined to end inside the distance. All these guys, prolific finishers. It was like minus 190, right? And in this fight, it's a women's fight. And women's fights always find a way to go to decision, right? Jamie Lynn Horth, 5-0, 5 wins inside the distance, finds a way to go to decision, right? It's just the way it is in the UFC a little bit. A little bit of parity. So women's MMA in the UFC, I'm talking about in particular, just finishes a little bit less. But the submissions are possible, right? That's, the knockouts I think are a little bit more limited. But the submissions, it's you could submit somebody that's a woman, that's a man, whatever, right? And so I think that the submission game is open here for Verna Janjidoba. I think she could definitely get a submission win here. But her striking is hit and miss, and her defense is a little bit questionable. and her durability is maybe not perfect. And she's fighting somebody who's a longer striker in the division who's quite dangerous and who has a knockout win in the UFC, which not many women can say. So I think that the fight doesn't go to decision is kind of interesting. Which one was not an early stoppage? I'm not sure which one you're talking about there at WW, but I'm happy to address it if you clarify for me, brother. And Rami does point out something that I think is true. Marina's a dog. She really wants to be there. She wants to win. All that's true. So I think she's tough. But again, she was like a skateboarder, bro. Like she was like a girl who's a skateboarder and doing whatever, picked up this MMA thing, and she was a striker first for the most part. So I just don't love he's talking about the Erosa fight. Great point, my man. I thought you were talking about one of Marina's fights. I was like, if anybody's calling the Marina Hebos fight an early stoppage, it ain't me, bro. that was a late stoppage, my man. He stopped it twice, but yeah, you're right. It was not an early stoppage. Well, here's what I'd say. Let me clarify that comment, because I think that the writing was more than on the wall, right? Like Erosa just couldn't take a punch from the guy, right? And that was what was happening. He could not take a punch from the guy cleanly, or he was getting dropped. But optically, when a guy is doing like a basketball stutter step in like perfect position, looking you dead in the eyes, and you stop the fight and he's got his hands up or whatever, it's just like, it looked really stupid, the stoppage. But I agree with you that nothing would have been different if he didn't stop it, except that Julian would have gotten hurt a little bit more and then it would have been stopped. But yeah, I do agree. I agree. He went out several times and he was just like, on the precipice, but it was crazy. Oh, Moy says she was a handball player, explains her hand power. Brilliant. I did not know that. I think she was a skateboarder too, bro. She had a skateboard in her UFC things for sure. But next up, Parker Porter and Braxton Smith. Guys, I did touch on this one already. Here's what I'll say. You know who I'm rooting for? Parker Porter. Not because I have anything against Braxton Smith. It's because I don't follow him on Instagram and he doesn't follow me. But Parker Porter, he follows me. He's a good guy, good American. He's got a good heart in there. And I hope it keeps on working, pumping for a long time. Hell of a fighter. So God bless him for it. But yeah, Parker, he's got good ground skills. He's been around for a long ass time, man. I think he fought John Jones in 2008, if memory serves. The guy's been around forever, 15 years, just an eternity in fight years. So I'm glad to see he's still doing the damn thing, but no confidence for me here in anything, maybe just the under 2.5. But even then, how many times have we seen sloppy MMA? The guys start getting real tired, like Adolfo, or like Rogerio de Lima and my guy Waldo Cortez Acosta. Yeah, bro, that's fair play. Next up, Ikram, Aliskerov, and Phil Hawes. This one's a sneaky one to be down this low on the card. Talk about guys being dealt a little bit from the bottom of the deck, huh? Talk about guys being dealt from the bottom of the deck. They took Phil Hawes and they just put him out to pasture, in my opinion. Am I saying he can't win this fight? Of course he could win this fight. I actually think he's from New Jersey. Let me check that. I believe that this guy, Phil Hawes, is from New Jersey, where this fight will be taking place. Little Ferry Zone. Little Ferry, New Jersey. Stand up, because your guy is back. So Jersey's own Phil Hawes, right? It's tough for me, bro, because this guy, Ikram Aliskerov, I believe his only loss in MMA is via knockout to Chimaev. Let me just double check that, because I don't want to be talking no shit. Yeah, man. Only loss of his career, and it's brutal. Make no mistake about it. He got knocked out. Like, he got badly knocked out with that uppercut. Chimaev hit that man with the force of God, but it's Chimaev. And we would take Chimaev to absolutely send Phil Hawes to an outer dimension of space, would we not? So that, I think, is, nothing that we would, nothing we would hold our head at. But I think that for me, Mario Sousa, that's not really a great win. Nishan Burrell is even probably a more impressive name to me than that. He has a win over Dennis Tilulian, another UFC level fighter. So obviously our guy Ikram is the goods. I think he's qualified to be at this level. And yeah, J-Bone made a really, really good point, which is Cheshire, you gotta chill for a second, my man. I don't know what just happened in my chat, but just take it easy, my man, with all the sexual stuff. His wrestling held up while it lasted against Chimaev. Yeah, man. I do agree. He looked very, very good. So I think that Phil Hawes, for the first 5 minutes, he's normally very good, but the problem was, guys, I think his knee got really hurt by Roman Dolidze, and this seems to me like very quickly he's getting back in there. Let me just double check when that fight was. I know, obviously, Roman has had fights in the interim. Yeah, that was last October, so it's been about 6 months. He got heel hooked really badly there, guys, and I thought he tore up his knee, and then for his troubles, right, he ended up gutting through it and got knocked out in horrendous fashion on the feet, brutally, 5 months back. This seems like a recipe for disaster. Seems like set up for failure. Maybe he got talked into it because, bro, we'll put you back on in Jersey. He seems to want to take on a fairly tough caliber of fighter. But, this guy, Ikram, I think he'd be a serious challenge for most guys, at middleweight, right? Like, I just feel like he would probably be an honest fighter he'd probably have an honest fight with a lot of guys at middleweight. But my only question here is just UFC jitters exist, right? They've gotten to a lot of people that you don't expect them to get to. Is there any chance that we see an underperformance from Ikram? He's coming in on a UFC pay-per-view, right? So he's debuting on a pay-per-view. That's kind of interesting as well. There's 2 Contender Series fighters that are debuting on the pay-per-view. We'll talk about the other one shortly. So I think that we've made, some interesting connections here, but I appreciate everybody who's commenting away in the chat. Want to get to what you guys are saying. Ikram, round 2. I think that that's a fair shout. Phil Hawes in round 1, he's a handful, but maybe Ikram takes a round to solve him. I think Ikram, maybe could solve him in the first round. My guy Billy says way too soon for a comeback. Tend to agree. He thinks Ikram should be minus 400. I don't know about all that. I'd have to give it a little more thought. I'd probably go closer to the 3XX range, but yeah, man, I can't really push back on you too hard. Minus 400 might be appropriate after research, honestly. My guy BP says, hammering Daniel Santos finish line. If that BP is Blake Perry, please identify yourself so I can talk about the greatest living American. But if you're just a normal guy named BP or a normal lady named BP, then shout out, and I appreciate you being here. Also, shout out to my guy, Felipe says, Liam's description of Rory Lawler is so good. I appreciate you, man. I'm gonna definitely think about the nice comments I've gotten. Maybe I'll clip that out or something, but just a fight that means a lot to me. I got the poster. I have a shirt signed by both guys. I went to the press conference before that fight. And Conor fought that night, but the most memorable thing about that night is that fight, and that's powerful. I think that the Conor fight that night against Chad Mendes, one gangster tear for Ireland, baby. But I'm talking, what are we doing when, this fight is just a masterpiece in the co-main event? It almost like, took some time to like move on to that next fight. It was just that fight card, UFC 189, go watch it back, start to finish. It's one of the best fight cards of all time. Absolutely fantastic. Our guy, Mr. D, shout out in the comments, says, UFC doing Hawes no favors with Ikram, but our guy, J-Bone, is going to push back. He says, sharps don't agree. Interesting. We'll have to wait and see, guys. We've got a Henry Belal parlay from our guy WW. He likes Movsar in there as well. We got Scam the Books, likes Ikram and Movsar. If you guys have been around for a while, then y'all know me for sure. To not be, typically a parlay guy. It's just everybody's got their bread and butter. Everybody's got what they're good at. But I am not as good with parlays. It's just not been my forte. I tend to be a guy who's a little contrarian, looking for the underdog. So yeah, I think those could end up looking really sharp, boys. And I wish you the very best. I'm gonna take every fight one at a time, one bet at a time. And Cheshire, no problem, bro. Just trying to keep it on topic for the people in the chat as well. Make sure everybody has a good experience. But I truly appreciate you being here. So thank you for understanding. Next up, guys, we've got a fight. Let me scroll back here. I ended up getting too deep in the Tapology portal of my guy Phil Hawes. Here's the other Dana White Contender Series guy who's debuting on a pay-per-view. He is the undefeated Rafael Estevam. And if I could tell you guys, one of my most confident picks on the card for no reason is this guy Estevam, right? And I have not looked into this fight at all. I'm telling you that up front. But I bet Estevam on the Contender Series. And now he's getting placement on a card. This is, a pretty decent card. He's getting placed on a pay-per-view. They're going to talk about this fight. They're going to try and promote this fight in some ways on the show. They're going to think about it, right? They're going to try and, market this guy, right? He's not just an afterthought on a fight night. They're actually putting him into a meaningful position on a fight card. And Zhalgas Zhumagulov, he's not just a guy. He's a guy that talked very recently about retiring, right? He said, I'm done. Like, I'm done. I'm retired. I'm done. He's a little bit older for the division. Could Zhalgas be here just to take a bag? Yeah, definitely. I'm very weary of the Zhalgas bag because here's the other thing. When Zhalgas fights his very best, gives his best effort, the judges screw him. The judges don't give it to him. I thought he beat Charles Johnson. They didn't give it to him. Charles Johnson would lose to everybody else. He just wouldn't lose to this guy. Who the hell can he beat? Jerome Rivera? It's tough. Maybe he's had a bunch of fights that went against him that were close. Eventually, that stops being a good thing, right? Eventually, it's just like, man, maybe they just don't like you and they don't give you the decisions. I think at a certain point, my guy ZZ Top, despite having love from the hardcores and everything like that, I think he's just a pretty disposable fighter that the average fight fan doesn't know who he is. They couldn't pick a Zhalgas Zhumagulov from a Ricky Rickerson. That's tough. But that's just the way it is. So I think that in all likelihood, we're not going to see very much out of Zhalgas in this fight. I don't think he wants to be here. But maybe if I hear this week, like, everything is on this, I'm coming back for everything that they took from me, maybe through a translator, but maybe they'll bring some effort and intensity, right? But like that's kind of what I need from Zhalgas to even consider that side. Because just truth is, I feel like he checked out mentally. I feel like he does not care if he wins or loses this fight in all likelihood. Whereas I feel like Rafael Estevam is going to define himself by whether he wins or loses this fight. So just something I'm keeping in the back of my mind, a little narrative that I'm running with. Shout out to my guy Cheshire as well. It says, hit the like button. Guys, I have not asked anybody to like nor subscribe to this channel, and I'd really appreciate it if you do because I'm here to talk fights, try and put you guys in a better position to bet if that's what you're into, but also if you just want to talk fights, break them down, get into the nitty gritty. I like doing that too. So appreciate you guys for being here. And if this is the kind of stuff that you like, make sure you get subscribed, drop a like on the video, and I'll keep making more content just like this. So thank you. Next up, Joseph Holmes taking on Claudio Ribeiro. And, a lot of people hate Claudio Ribeiro, where I love Claudio Ribeiro doing the stupid stuff, coming out, yelling and everything. Oh, it's fun. It doesn't always have to be we're all angry and grr. But does it make me inspired to go bet on you? I mean, God, no. No, it doesn't do that. But does it make me inspired to bet against you? It doesn't quite do that either because Claudio Ribeiro, he's got them bricks for hands, baby. I don't know that he's got real skills and everything under it all. I don't know how much cardio he's got, but he can put bodies to the floor when he starts swanging them hammers. And at the end of the day, it's a cage fight. It's a steel cage fight. And he's fighting Joseph Holmes. I like Joe Holmes. He seems like a really nice, wholesome guy. He's a very down-to-earth individual. But I just, physically, I've never seen it. I just feel like he's not very physical. Feel like he's got length and he's got some attributes. I feel like he's a hard worker. I feel like he wants to be better and he's working hard. But man, I just feel like in a lethality contest, Joseph Holmes not at the top of my list. They gave him a freaking layup in Alan Amedovski because, and it's no disrespect to Alan. He's just not a UFC level fighter either. Right? He's a guy that kind of swangs and bangs for the finish and hope for the best, but really doesn't have all the skills to put it together for the 15 minutes. And if he does, he's just never been able to display it inside the octagon. This isn't that, this is another, living human being that wants to fight and be in there and win and throw hammers and try and kill you. So I think Joseph Holmes by sub and Claudio Ribeiro by KO are the two ways I would consider playing this. Of course, alongside the fight doesn't go to decision. Now, would I be hammering any of these things? No, because these are low-level fighters. But just, again, this is a gut reaction. Like Claudio Ribeiro could absolutely knock this guy out, and he could do it quickly, But the longer the fight goes on, the more likely it is that he does silly things, gives up bad positions, and gets submitted. Because Joseph Holmes, he's not a bad grappler, and I think he's probably competent enough to put it together in those realms of the fight. But yeah, I mean, Joseph Holmes lost pretty cleanly to Jamie Pickett. I bet Jamie Pickett that night, so you won't catch me betting on Jamie Pickett very often. That'll tell you everything you need to know. I truly appreciate the kind words, my man, Cheshire Cat. Very, very kind stuff. Also, I do like the UFC translator as well. He does a great job. They do a pretty good job translating for the fighters, I think, by and large. Not perfect, but my guy WW says Johnny Munoz lost me when he got TKO'd by Tony Gravely. Cut this man after this fight. We've got somebody who is still not happy from the last one. Shout out to our guy Anthony W. Says, same though, made me money on Contender. Shout out. Our guy Billy says this will be a low-level MMA fight. Yes. A layup, says OCO. And I think OCO might be new to the chat as well. I certainly don't recognize the name, but I do appreciate you being here, my friend. Thank you. Pfeiffer versus Amedovski was hilarious. Yeah, that one, one of the most sure things I've ever been in my life was Joe Pfeiffer round one. I was just like, that. How would he not? Round 1 or 2, how would he not? Yo, shout out to Royal George. Hey, Liam, great show. Hope you have a profitable weekend. And let's go, Aljo, the king of New York, baby. One more for them jiu-jitsu guys. One more for them D3 wrestlers, baby. That'd be sick, George. Appreciate you being here as well. So many great people have stopped by today. And last up, the final fight. Normally if you guys watch my show with Rich that I do every week, we start at the bottom of the card and work our way up to the top. But today, we started at the top and we have gradually worked our way down. It's like a news story. Sometimes they start with the real meat of it, and by the end, you're just talking about whatever's left. And that's what we got. We got whatever's left. And it's Daniel Willie Cat Santos versus Johnny Munoz Jr. And you might be thinking to yourself, yo, this sounds like something that would be on a main card of a fight night. And you're right. That's why this fight card is so much better than a lot of the fight cards we've been dealt on recent fight nights. I mean, they've been stacking the pay-per-views and just leaving crap, not even a crap sandwich, just crap with a cherry on top, a nice Song Yadong Ricky Simone main event that in the end wasn't as competitive as we all thought, but, it was a fun matchup on paper, right? Everything else, I mean, it's just, it could have been called UFC, who are you? I said on Twitter, it could have been called UFC, phoned it in. They're not trying as hard on these fight nights. They're doing it at the Apex. They're not really trying to fork over, fans for their hard-earned dollar for a ticket. So they're just phoning it in. But guys, we're the consumers. So we got to push back at some point and say, hey, please put on good fights or we're not going to watch this shit. It's like, or we're going to be, trying to shop our business elsewhere to the PFL Bellator conglomerate that people were making up this weekend. I thought to myself, I was like, what? Like it didn't even make sense to me conceptually. I was like, Bellator is owned by Viacom and they're being sold to ESPN, which also houses the It's like, what? None of it made sense to me from Jump Street, but it'd be cool if it happened because I think the UFC needs some competition, like a prod. They need something to keep them pushing forward because they get a little bit complacent at times, and I feel like we've been seeing an era of complacency recently in the UFC. I don't feel like the same, the same fire that, there's been times that the sport is just simply on fire. Can't miss entertainment. Everything feels different. And it's just been, I felt like a little bit of a lull. So I want to see the UFC zone it back up. And I think there's a great fight this weekend. So great fight on top of a great card. I think there's a lot to work with. Shout out to my guy. Billy says, appreciate you putting out the early info this week, Liam. Man of the people, one of the sharpest dudes out. I truly appreciate the kind words. What I like to think is I try and do my work. I try and, come to you guys, win, lose, draw, and tell you what I have, why I have it, what I'm thinking, and let the chips fall where they may. And third-party tracked on Bet MMA tips. But I don't win every week, right? I've had tough weeks. I've had tough runs, right? I've been honestly just disappointed this year with my results. I'm profitable in the year, but last year I was much further along at this point in the year, right? So we all go through these journeys, personal growth, all these things. And one of the things I've done this year is I've changed my process a little bit. And there's been some adjustment to that. There's been some, things that I'm trying to still square away in the process. But overall, it's just about making more good bets and fewer bad bets. The more you do that, the more you win. That is the simplest way I could distill the game we're playing here. The fewer times I look at myself and I say, wow, that was a really stupid bet. Why did I make that bet? That's a good thing, right? And sometimes you make a bet and it doesn't go your way and you say, that was a great bet. That's the goal. Make only those bets. And when I do that, win, lose, or draw, I can live with the outcome. That's what we have to think. So I think that for me, putting in the work early, trying to come up with my own opinion, my own thoughts before the hive mind, before the recency bias, before the reinforcement talk in the community, and I love the community, but these are things that I always try and be very cognizant of them because they're real. Psychological biases, you got to be aware of what they are and how they can get you. And people will only listen to people that agree with them. I listen to everybody. I'm listening for something that they have that I don't have, something that I didn't account for, something I missed in my due diligence and my research. And that's the way to approach this because unless they have something that I didn't think of, oh, what, he knows how to wrestle? Yeah, I thought of that. Yeah. I never thought of that. Yeah, the guy knows how to wrestle. Yeah, I thought of that. Right. But if they say, yeah, the guy's knee blew out, 6 weeks ago and he's just strapping it together with tape and what, well, boy, I didn't know that. So now I'm glad that I got this information. This is why I pay attention. I try and find the best information that I can. I try and source great information and try and share it with everybody, as many people as I can. So this year, my point of emphasis has been limiting my exposure, betting less and trying to find a way to win with less on the line. And that's hard. And that it's made for times where it hurts when you just have only 3 or 4 bets and they all don't come through. You feel like you didn't give yourself an honest chance. But I've had nights where all my reads didn't come through and I had 20 bets, right? And that hurts, right? That's a big loss on a single night. And one thing that you have to understand is this is a psychological battle with yourself at all times when you're gambling. So when you're doing really well, you're like, I'm on top of the world. I'm the best. I can't lose at this. Wrong. Oh, yes, you can. You could definitely fuck up. You could fuck it all up in a day. So you have to always think about, am I making a bet that I could support after the fact if it loses? Got to think. That's the way you got to think. And so Jamie Lynn Horth was the only money line that I could really stomach telling somebody else that I truly thought it was going to win. I truly thought that this is the one. I could put my money here and say, I think that this girl will go out and fight for me to win. And if she loses here, I will get a better price on her and bet her again at 125 pounds because I believe in her. That is a different bet than saying, I'm going to throw in hope, shit, I can't believe it didn't win. Those are the bets that you say, why did I do that? Why did I make that bet? That's a stupid bet. I just threw that. Those are what we have to try and avoid. Psychological battle, game against ourselves. So I think that maybe these are the things that people don't always talk about, but these are the things that are really important. So I'll get back to the fights now, but just a little bit of gambling interlude, just what we're really doing here, trying to make fewer bad bets. The more you do that, the better you'll be, because it's a distillation process. It's trimming the fat. It's just what is the real meat of what I want to get to? What is the real thing? And that doesn't always mean put all the eggs in one basket. This is the holy grail play. It just might mean, I bet I'm speaking now from my personal experience, and it's been everybody do your own thing and whatever. But my betting slate was a 1.5 unit bet on a woman's money line to win a unit, half a unit bet on Egger and Alexieva not to go the distance. That fight ended extremely quickly. And then I bet on, and by the way, like 4 days ago, I sent in the Lab VIP. Alexieva by sub at 11-1 doesn't make sense. It's her best chance to win. So if you're going to bet Alexieva, just bet the 11-1 by sub. So, by the way, the screenshots are on my Twitter. Go check that. But it's just things like I try and do my due diligence and really come prepared when we're talking on these shows, because I know that people, listen and try and make informed, intelligent opinions. They try and sharpen up their own process. And so I try and share things that aren't just like, the punch, the kick, but the real background information, the stuff that if you listen to handicapping of other sports, it is not only about the X's and the O's. It's not only about, this linebacker is really talented and he does that. No, they talk about other things, especially when I'm talking strictly about handicapping. So I think really sharp handicappers, if they're never talking about what the number opened up at, if they're never talking about how the number's been moving, if they're never talking about the market conditions, I'm going to be a little bit more skeptical of their opinion, because there is a very small percentage of people that can sharply originate in MMA. And if you guys aren't deep in the weeds in gambling, that's okay. It's no problem. But talking about just people that don't follow steam, they don't see a number go from, plus 190 to plus 170 and say, wow, that must be sharp. I'm going to jump in at plus 170. People that hit the number and then the number starts to move, these kind of things, right? Those are originators, right? People that market move, they shape the market, things like this. That's coming up with your own opinion and saying, I'm going to bet this. Then there's, many other ways to bet on sports, like steam chasing and arbitrage betting and things that people try and do to make money, that you don't have to have a strong opinion one way or the other. You say, this number is not the same as all these other numbers. It's plus expected value to every other number in the market. So I'm going to take it and hope for the best. And I'm going to do this over and over and hope that having the best of it over and over is going to put me in a position to win. And that is one way to win. But you can make a bigger return if you can have sharp origination to your work. I believe in a hybrid model. I do not think that I'm smarter than everybody. I do not think I know better than the market. I have seen many times, I could give you guys an example where the market just told me I was dead wrong about something, okay? I thought that Andre Feely, now I have to look it up because I get these two confused every time, but Andre Feely, I'm going to look at his record, and he just won a fight with a back body triangle over our guy Belal Gio, just burst back into the winner's circle. I confuse Belal Gio and Billy Quarantillo every time, even though I know them to be different people. Just saying the names, I always start getting them confused. It's one of those things. I've seen too many fighters. I've wrote too many notes about them. But anyways, right? Before that fight, I just felt like Belal was going to win. I just thought he was a little bit more slick on the ground. I thought he had a little bit of skills to offer there. I thought he could keep the pace going that maybe Andrade wouldn't want to keep up with. And to tell you the truth, it just was a market education, because I looked at the market and the market was saying that the books kept getting money, just agreeing with me. Right? Everybody agreed with me. Yeah, he's going to win. And they did not care. They kept the number what they had it before. They had the number. They took every bet and they kept the number. And guess who won? It was not Belal. So when you look at something like that, I say to myself, it's a good thing I had the humility to say, F what I think about this, because my thoughts are not being reflected in the market. They're not being reflected as a sharp position. They're being, shown to be a bankrupt position. Because if everybody agrees with you, except the odds maker, you're wrong. Almost always. If everybody agrees with you, except the odds maker, more often than not, you're wrong, because you never met a bookmaker with a part-time job. Not in Las Vegas, right? So there we have it, folks. Talking about this last fight of the night, we can clear this up. Daniel Willie Cat Santos and Johnny Munoz Jr. Munoz Jr., he's a little bit tough to trust right now, to tell you the truth. Got 2 losses in his career, same as Daniel Santos, but got knocked out by Tony Gravely, beat Ludovic Sholinian. Not exactly sure what to make of that win. Want to see a little bit more from Ludovic. Shout out to Red Fox. Says, used to watch this guy on Z's MMA Friday show. You've come a long way. Hey, I appreciate you, my brother. I'm a student of the game. That's what I think of myself as. And shout out to my guy, Billy. Says, is Z still alive? I hope so, brother. I haven't talked to him in a little bit, but still drinking out of the odds mug. Always will. Salute. And I think that Z's, is often misunderstood by people. I always thought he was a very nice guy, meant well, kind of a quirky personality. And he just overall treated me really well. In our personal interactions, I've shared some of my notes and stuff with him. And so I wish him the very best, man. And the odds mug is dope. Hope to have my own mug one day, but I'll never get rid of my odds mug, man. It's sick, and I feel like it's a prop on the show. I feel like I would be naked if I didn't have it, right? It's part of the show at this point. So shout out to my guy Z's. He taught me a lot early on and schooled me up a little bit. And man, I just never stopped learning. And I appreciated him for that platform as well. So man, it's all blessings all around. Great people and a lot of great people in the chat. So just shout out to all you guys. I appreciate it. In terms of what else we've got to talk about today, we could just briefly touch on our guy, Willie Cat. I didn't really mention what I think of him. Boy, he looked much improved in that last fight, no? Daniel Santos, I got to bring up his record. He came in with a loss against Julio Arce, and shout out, New York's own Tiger Schulman's guy. He's a really tough fighter. If you don't put him away, if you don't hurt him, if you don't get him on the back foot, he's a really tough fighter to deal with. He's just a tricky guy. And so Daniel tried to come forward. He tried to bring his game, but he was just getting schooled by a guy who's a little bit more experienced, a little more educated. It was short notice, I think. But, now we're seeing that win over John Castaneda. That might age okay. Castaneda, sexy Mexi, not a bad fighter, man. And I thought he did a great job there, holding up to some pressure, finding a way to get the win. Johnny Munoz Jr. has probably got an edge here when it comes to the grappling game, the wrestling game. But I also am just a little bit nervous, seeing that brutal knockout loss in his past on his record, just 2 fights ago. And now he's taking on the Willie Cat. Shoot the box. My guy WW ain't kidding. Just like Charles, he's going for that finish. 100%, man. Showtime. Think this is the first time I've seen Showtime comment today. So Showtime, I appreciate you. In the algiophilia example you gave, aren't you giving the bookie too much credit? You're basically saying that they capped the fight better than you. No, what I'm saying is that they have better information than I do. What do I mean by that? The bookmaker is seeing that other handicappers, right? Other handicappers saw what I saw. They're like, Bill, you should probably outlast him. He's probably got better physical skills, whatever. But the bookmaker might have taken a bet from like Bill Algio's brother that said Bill, or like whatever. They took a bet from Bill Algio's orthodontist, and he was overheard at the counter saying that it doesn't matter. If the bookmaker doesn't respect the action, you have to ask yourself why. And it could be for any number of reasons. It could be for 10 reasons. They could have inside information. Their sharpest guy that bets with them could be the other way, right? He could have come in and bet, 50,000 on the other side. So for them, it's fine to keep booking, bet, take more of them. So I think that's a great question. And I'm glad you asked it because it's a point that deserves being made. You can cap a fight very well. But number one, fights are volatile. It's not always an exact science, let's say. It's about beating numbers first and foremost. But on top of that, I'm always taking into consideration, like think about this. The Martin Budai line the other day, he was like minus 110, minus 120, minus 130. Wasn't really cracking above that. And it ended up being a really close-ish, greasy fight. But everybody was on Budai, especially on some of the public books. And it just, they just didn't move the number. They didn't respect it. And it ended up being a really close fight, ended up going to a really close decision. It's just to say sometimes it's not going to matter, right? Sometimes the market's going to get one over on the bookmaker, right? Maybe they should have moved the number more. Maybe they should have adjusted to Budai. But maybe people were hammering the under, right? So there's other ways. What I always like to say is the bookmaker needs to make their money by the end of the night, preferably, right? They don't need to make their money fight over fight. So they can let you get one, they can let you get two, but they can't let you get all the ones that they need, right? It's just like they could lose a couple games during the NFL season, no skin off their nose, because they win on so many of them. Because they win so much on the big games that matter, on the games that everybody bets on, right? So the main event might be the one that they got to get right, or the co-main event, or the parlay buster, right? Think about the fact that on the John Jones fight card, every favorite one, except for who? Valentina Shevchenko, the biggest favorite of them all. Parlay buster. See what I'm saying? That's what you got to think about. Does the bookmaker get what they need to close out the end of the night in the green? And in the UFC, the answer is almost always, if not always, yes. So that's why I respect every part of it. I respect every part of it. The market, I try and take account of, and this is something where I have some humility in this too. I'm always improving my process and changing it just slightly. One thing I used to take into account was just where the line opened. But then I started to realize there's more to even an opening number that you need to understand. So now I take into account the opener offshore on BetOnline, and I take into account the opener in Las Vegas because those are the markets that matter. That's why. So as far as I'm concerned, more information is better. You don't want to overthink it. You don't want to overanalyze the information that you have, but there's not a harm in knowing more information. It can help you make a better decision. So that is part of my process. That's how I approach it. Information is key. If you guys have ever watched, I've done content before, how to take better notes. If you want to take, really detailed notes on fighters and stuff like that, it's just a really good way to improve your thought process about these things. It's a thinking game. It's a numbers game. That's why I love it. It combines both. You have to really play on multiple levels in this betting stuff because it's an information business first and foremost, but it's a numbers game. Square that circle for me. It's the beauty of life. Fight talk only. Lifelong earners are lifelong Excuse me, I butchered it. Lifelong learners are lifelong earners, my man. Shout out to you. Words to live by. Words to live by. My guy Billy says, read more books, fellas. You know it. Got to. I just think I've learned a lot from freaking what do we got on here? Oh, I don't even have it up here. I got to grab it. It's probably in my backpack, but The Logic of Sports Betting. I mean, a fantastic read. If you don't know a lot about how odds makers set their odds, things like that, it's really, really powerful book. It's an easy-ish read too. It's not super in the weeds, super high level academic type stuff. It's very approachable. And I think that's the kind of book where if you're just getting started in this stuff, if you're newer at betting and you have some knowledge of MMA and that stuff, it's what I call the green lumber fallacy. Knowing about MMA, it's just the start, my friend. You got to know what you're dealing with. You got to know what you're getting yourself into. And I think knowing about MMA is great, but you got to know how to bet on sports. And that in and of itself is a skill. Learning how to bet on sports is a skill. Learning what matters, it doesn't matter. It's a skill. So the only way to improve your skills, practice. Practice. Doesn't have to be high stakes. It can be very small stakes, especially when you're learning. Practice and discipline. Try and keep it as simple as possible. So, guys, we've talked about every fight on the card. We've gone for 2 hours and 35 minutes. I want to say to the 53 of you that are still rocking with me live, I hope that you dropped a like on this video if you've enjoyed the content that we've discussed so far. I hope that you guys subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I still got some time. I still got some energy, some enjoyment. So if you guys have any final questions, comments, concerns, things that you want to get off your chest, it could be questions about upcoming fights. It could be questions about betting process. It could be questions about anything. Go ahead and fire them off. We'll leave the floor open for probably 5 more minutes or so, but we're just going to start winding down the live stream. But yeah, I mean, I just want to say what you guys can expect from me coming up in the interim. Thursday, going to be a busy day for me, looking like I'm going to be doing a show with my guy Lou Betcha. So if you're excited about that, you can go ahead and follow my guy Lou Betcha. Going to be talking with him and my guy Wiz Betts. I think I'm going to be doing something as well with my guys Couch Warrior Pod and Addicted to Combat, Patrick from Addicted to Combat. So if you guys are interested in getting more of my fight talk, that will be after I've done my research. That will be after I've gone through the process. It will also be after the Just Win Baby podcast coming at you guys live, episode number 11, 3:00 in the East. That's going to be Thursday this week with my guy Rich, Just Win Baby. Wasn't our best weekend. I did okay. Wasn't Rich's best weekend, I don't think, off the top of my head. But I'll tell you, the guy is a very consistent winner. So I would be stunned if he does not come back with a vengeance this week. Very sharp capper. So excited. And my guy Red Fox brings up maybe the best point that he possibly could. Big game 7 tomorrow evening, Rangers versus Devils. They thought they had us in that last one, but there's hashtag no quit in New York. And that's what they forgot. So New York brought it. I hope that we can bring it once again. I got a family member who's a New Jersey Devils fan. I can hardly utter the words, but yeah, it divides households, this hockey game. But yeah, I'm a fly-by-night fan, but New York and Ohio, those are the 2 states I'm repping. New York, where I'm born. Ohio, first place I ever chose to live. So for me, loyalty plus EV. That's what I always say. I met a lot of great people out there. But shout out to our Devils fans in here too. I still got love and respect for my guy, Bo Jackson. Hope that you guys have a great tour of Mexico or wherever they go after, but I'm hoping our guys can send you guys packing with love and respect, my bro. But go Leafs, go. Hey, shout out, cheers. As long as it's my Rangers advancing, that's fine. And my guy WW, he's talking about upcoming fights. He says Topuria easy. Who's that against? Did we announce a Topuria fight that I'm not aware of? I need this. Need this in my life. Who's he fighting? Looking for news on Ilya. Let's see this. Oh, no way. Oh, he's fighting Josh Emmett, huh? Is that confirmed? Wow. Wow, that's confirmed, huh? Oh, boy. They're cashing out Josh Emmett, huh? I like Josh. That's a horrific matchup for Josh. It's a horrible matchup for Josh. Maybe the worst I could think of, save for Yair Rodriguez. Dude, that guy Yair Rodriguez put a working on that boy. Yes, he did. I had Yair by knockout there. That hurts. That hurts. He beat the ever-loving hell out of that guy. Didn't cash my ticket. Brutal. That's why we always bet the ITD, folks. Don't let yourself get caught. Think about McGee, right? If I had bet that guy McGee, who was on the show on Saturday, I probably would have went with that KO prop, the juicy plus 300. He ends up getting the submission on the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Fatigue makes cowards of us all. Being hurt can make you tap. All these things. It doesn't matter what the skill level is. If I wrap my arm around your neck, you're going to sleep one way or the other. Showtime says, maybe it was the example you gave that confused me. I had feeling in that fight, and I moved the market on a consistent basis. There was respected action on each side, hence the pick of mine. All respect, best of luck. Yeah, I think that the majority of the respected action, my friend, was on your side, and I think that that's why the line didn't move. But yeah, dude, I think overall, if you know that you're a sharp originator, like just keep rolling with that. I have done sharp originating, and I had about a 6% ROI. And since I've done a hybrid approach, I'm at about an 8 to 9% ROI. But again, it's hit and miss because I've had times where a market read has just completely blown up in my face, like Robert Whittaker winning as he was like minus 200 or whatever against Vettori. And I bet Vettori plus 190, and it blew right the hell up in my face because the market said Vettori should win. I'm saying straight up, just looking at the numbers on the market, looked to me like Vettori was going to win, and he didn't even win a second. So, yeah, I think that sometimes you got to just trust your gut and go with your own handicap, and sometimes you got to respect the market. So I just think that you had a sharper handicap that time, my brother. And also, it was a fight that I didn't dig into super deep. It was a fight. It was kind of like a tangential read. I was like, don't love the price. Don't, feel a need to get invested. So yeah, I think just overall, that's good work by you, my man. Keep doing what you're doing. Trust your process. It's a main event. It's a main event. I mean, deserved main event. That's going to be a fun banger if it stays on the feet. But I don't see Josh Emmett defending takedowns from Ilia Topuria. And I think that there's a chance he loses, standing in vicious fashion early. So it's just a really tough fight. Really, really tough fight. Any other questions, guys? We'll wrap at 3:15. Let's call it. That's an even number. So we got 4 more minutes left. Yeah, Mr. D says you couldn't trust Newsom. Yeah, fair play, man. I had a small bet on Newsom by sub. But, again, this is where I was kicking myself because could have sacrificed $2.50 of value for the fight ends by sub, right? And you always think like, oh, but that guy's not going to get the sub. And then there it is. I just felt like there was going to be a grappling dynamic in this fight. I felt like Newsom had to force that to win. That was kind of my logic. And in the end, I was right, but it didn't matter because he was hurt too bad and he was getting bodied on the feet. His takedowns weren't working, and Marcus was better everywhere. Too physical, too athletic, and wanted it better. So great showing from him. Great showing. And the worst part is, man, I actually sent in the lab VIP like sharp underdog indicators. The 3 sharp underdog indicators didn't have the heart to bet any of them, but they all came through. Quinlan, McGee, and who was the other one? It wasn't Alex Siva. Who was another dog that won last week? Waters. It was Waters. And I actually picked Waters by decision for my Roto Grinders article. And then right before the fight started, I talked myself into Quinlan ITD. So, guys, always trust your initial read or pass on the fight. That is my biggest lesson to live by, because sometimes we get caught up in that moment live during the fight card, and you just forget things that you knew earlier in the week. That's how the broadcast can be. Shout out to my guy, Fight Talk Only, says, will Aljo find himself on his back, or will Henry find Aljo on his back? What if I told you no one shot for a takedown at all? Bum, bum, bum. No, I'm kidding. I think that I think it's hard to say, man. I would not be stunned if both men got a takedown at some point, but I don't think that Aljo is likely to get his normal takedowns unless he spams volume takedowns and pops out on the back. I feel like for Aljo, this isn't a takedown battle. This is I need to create a jiu-jitsu battle by getting on your back. I think Henry could take down Aljo, but why would he want to? I don't think that I actually think that's the worst idea for Henry in this fight, is to introduce grappling when it's not necessary. Because I think that for as long as he can keep this on the feet, he will be more comfortable than Aljo. I'm fairly confident in that. Liam, how would you line Topuria versus Evloev? Am I a bookmaker or am I a bettor? If I'm a handicapper, I might line it different than if I'm a bookmaker. But as a handicapper, it's an interesting question. That fight was booked before, no? I think at the time I favored Ilia Topuria to win. I mean, my personal line would probably be minus 125 Ilia. But here's what I'll say. Ilia, to me, is a better striker, and I think he's a little bit more powerful. Again, I haven't refreshed myself. If I did research right now, I could come back to you and say, what am I talking about? But just from my gut level impressions, what I think about these guys, and I think Ilia is more powerful on the feet. He throws well to the body. I think the composure of Ilia is good. I thought that he gassed out against Yusuf Zalal back in the day, going for the finish. He went for like 3 Darce chokes in a row, and he held up well. He was poised in that fight. He just did enough in the places he needed to hold on, and that was on short notice. It was a UFC debut. I think that he's shown some growth. He's shown some improvements. He's a physical specimen. He looks like a beast. And aside from that head kick from Jai Herbert, he's been relatively aces, in my opinion. So I think that Ilia is a real handful for everybody in the division. I think Movsar is very, very good, and I think he's probably going to win this weekend. But I do think there might be a point where he reaches a ceiling. I thought that Dawodu fight was a terrible look in the 3rd round. I really did. He was getting hurt there, backing up, running from the engagements. And Dawodu is not a guy who's head and shoulders above the rest of the division, is he? I definitely don't think Ilia is unbeatable. I think people can knock him out for sure. But, you're talking about fine lines. I think he's very good. I think he competes with almost everybody. I don't know one person in this division he's not going to compete with. Maybe a Max Holloway. I struggle to see that. I think he would compete with Max, probably be a good fight. So, yeah, I actually think Ilia Topuria, if he beats Josh Emmett, probably moves into title contention or a Max Holloway fight. So stay tuned. But I think he's going to beat Josh Emmett. So yeah. Mel is correct about this. No, he's been hurt before, but I believe that was at bantamweight, in fairness. Believe that was in bantamweight. Oh yeah, Mr. D. You got to remind yourself of these things. You'll learn and unlearn the same lessons over and over. in gambling unless you write it down. So good on you, Mr. D. I think that that's wise. But just remind yourself what you're doing. Remind yourself the process. Remind yourself to never let your highs get you too high. Never let your lows get you too low. So what my coach Jamie Gibbs used to say, college wrestling, Coach Derek Brunson, a lot of other guys, very great coach. And so many of the things he said stick with me. Note takers are money makers. Lifelong learners are lifelong earners, like my guy Fight Talk Only said, right? So these are the certain things that I help guide my process with, things that I've learned over a very difficult and emotional career in wrestling and all these things. It's like, you learn to deal with, it's not always going to go my way. How can I get better? What can I learn from this? That's what you got to ask yourself, So yeah, Ilya's stand-up is super technical, Mel, for sure. His boxing is crispy. He throws heat to the body. He throws heat to the head. I would say sometimes he's almost too aggressive. Yeah, Red Fox, he just hit the nail on the head. He said, great boxing and goes to the body. That's exactly what I think too. He's got good kicks of his own. He's just so aggressive. He's so aggro that he can almost, he can almost put himself into danger unnecessarily. Like, why is he not wrestling Jai Herbert into the ground? That's what he probably should have been doing, trying to, at least in the early going. But he likes to swang and bang. He likes to throw down. He likes to hurt people. And I think Evloev is not going to want any of that. I think he's going to try and close distance right away and grab a hold of this guy and never let go and try and get into exchanges. But Ilya is a pretty good Greco guy. So I don't think he's going to get completely dominated in the wrestling. But I do think Evloev, he's nothing to be trifled with. I think a cage stalling performance would be his best path to victory there. Not to say he can't win other ways. I think that would be his best path to victory. Yeah, a kick-heavy person could trouble Ilya. I actually think Yair could beat Ilya for those reasons. I think on the ground he might get audited. He's definitely been improving. But I do think that, Yair is extremely dangerous with his offense. I used to say that I thought Josh Emmett or Yair Rodriguez posed the greatest threat to Volkanovski at 145 because they have dynamic power, right? Like Max Holloway, as much as we like him, he's got to win rounds, right? Against Arnold Allen. He's got to win rounds. He's not putting guys away. He's just not. He goes over in, I think, 18 of now 19 of 23 UFC fights. I mean, it's unbelievable. Max Holloway is an over printer. On the other hand, right, Yair Rodriguez be putting guys away. He'd be finishing you. You reach your arm in there like Brian Ortega, he'll break that shit, right? So I think that Yair, kind of criminally underrated guy, but extremely dynamic in all positions. He's the kind of guy that can finish anybody. He could beat anybody. He could lose to some guys too, right? He could lose to worse guys than, maybe a Volkanovski or a Max Holloway. They can maybe beat more guys if you lined them all up. But just any one guy on any one night, this guy Yair Rodriguez, who's to say he can't beat anybody? He was losing to TKZ for much of the fight. It takes 1 second, fight's over. Thanks for playing. This is a game of no forgiveness. And Yair Rodriguez, he's tougher than all hell. He's taking beatings from Max Holloway. And dude, if Max Holloway didn't have a chin from south of Hades, he would have been slapped many times in that fight. He got hit cleanly right on the chin. So I think Yair Rodriguez could absolutely knock him out. I think he would be a tough matchup. I think that Max Holloway would at least create a tough matchup because he can potentially defend some submissions that outlast him. And I think that he has great cardio and phenomenal pace and volume. He could take over a fight late. But I think that would be a stylistic, difficult matchup for Max in some ways as well, because of all the danger that Ilya poses and the takedown upside in the early going. So he's no easy picnic for anybody, period, in the weight class. Not Volk either. But he's not unbeatable. He's not unfathomable that somebody else could beat him. He's still got points of development, but just from the raw potential he's working with, he's a very scary guy. He's a scary guy to be lining up bets against. I'll tell you that. This guy, Ilya Topuria, Ryan Hall, he's a pretty good specialist. He got put in the box quick and bad, ugly fashion. So, yeah, I just feel like that fight showed me Ilya knows when to go, like he knew exactly when this is my opportunity. I'm going to finish him. And he just finished him. When he has somebody hurt, he just finishes him. That knockout of Jai Herbert after he was already briefly stunned is just insane. Like, guys, how many guys in MMA have ever recorded a knockout that clean? Like, it is one of the cleanest knockouts you will ever see. He put that man in outer space forever. Like, dude, Jai Herbert was walking around the arena while he was still laying down. It's like, that was an insane knockout. It was scary. It's like, I was not even like, oh my God, I'm so excited. I was like, I hope this man is well. I am nervous for this man. He got hurt. And that kind of power it's something you got to reckon with. Most guys in MMA don't throw to the body. And when they do, they throw a dipping jab. They might know one, leaning hook to the body or something. But these guys that just rip it in combination, they could just shut you down, And I felt like Song Yadong, that was the thing that maybe went unremarked upon in that fight. He hit a couple uppercuts to the balls, but, he was landing some nice body work throughout that fight, jabs, hooks to the body. Man, it doesn't matter. I can have real good cardio. If I don't have a rib, I'm not breathing so good. It's like, if I can't breathe through all my bruised ribs, I can have all the cardio I want. It's just not going to make a difference. So I felt like that was that's always been Yair's ace in the hole, but that's also what makes guys really dangerous. How many tools do you have that are really dangerous that can finish a fight? That's something that you got to ask from a betting perspective. And now we're just going to go to the 3-hour mark, guys, because we've already gone at this point well past 3:15. We're going to 3:30. We're going to 2:55 or till 2:55 on that runtime turns into 3 hours. So appreciate you guys that are still rocking with us. Over 40 people been doing the damn thing for a little while now. This part will probably be a little bit less on the replay value for some of the other people watching the channel, but I do this for the people that support me, all the people that have my back, and appreciate 42 people taking a time out of your day to spend some time talking fights with me. That tells me that you guys like fights just as much as I do. If you're a nerd for something like this, but I'm a nerd too for these fights, man. Oh, I do have it here. The Logic of Sports Betting. I was talking about it before. I thought I didn't have it. It was too close to me to see, but this book right here, powerful. If you bet on MMA, if you bet on any sport, powerful book. Even if you just want to learn more about the industry, a little bit of the back and forth, two guys that put together a very simple, understandable book. We'll talk about what else we got on the shelf while we got the time. And again, if you got any last questions, please go ahead. But this book came highly recommended by our guy, Jack Slack, and it's a great book. One thing I like to tell people as well, if you don't know about something, that's okay. Just try and familiarize yourself with it over time. Try and get better at it. I know wrestling, right? You're not going to tell me something about wrestling and I'm going to be shocked, stunned, baffled most of the time, right? I know wrestling. I've been doing it for 10 years. I've been doing it for 12 years, whatever it is. I've been doing it for a long portion of my life and caring about it deeply for a long portion of my life and staying active in the community and coaching and this and that and whatever. So wrestling, I got pretty down pat. Jiu-jitsu, I've been doing for some time. I've been watching MMA for a very long time. I know my way around the grappling, the MMA grappling. Been to strong style MMA in Ohio. Been to several different jiu-jitsu gyms. Kron Gracie jiu-jitsu gym in my local area. Great stuff, right? So the grappling, the wrestling, I have a pretty good grasp. I know when people are good. I know when they stink. I know when people have good skills, and I know when they don't. But striking's hard to understand. I try my very best. I've been in gyms with striking guys. I've moved around. I've gone on the bag, right? I've gotten tips from pro fighters, right? A guy that fought Calvin Kattar was showing me how to throw hooks and jabs and whatever. But again, there's a level gap between that and throwing on the offbeat to catch somebody, with a hook and then pivot off and I'm not going to pretend to you I'm Johnny Boxing, right? I don't know everything about about every combat sport on the highest level. So if I talk about boxing on this channel, like I have a number of times, when Ben Askren's going to fight Jake Paul or something like that, celebrity boxing, oh, I'm a beast, because I'll go back and do my process and actually research this stuff and find out, oh, Ben Askren needs a hip replacement. He's doing this for money, right? And I'll try and warn people on this channel, don't bet on him, right? But when it comes to who's going to win between Floyd Mayweather and Canelo Alvarez, I would just be a charlatan if I was like, I know for sure who's going to win. I don't know boxing on that level. There, I have to be more cognizant of the market. I have to be more cognizant of expert opinion. Whereas MMA, I can have my own opinion. I feel like I've proven and demonstrated through time and results that I have the right to an opinion in MMA. But in boxing and these things, I want to make sure I humble myself to the process. I'm always learning more. So if I could pick up a book like Championship Fighting and start learning more about foot positioning that matters, shout out to my guy, Understand Boxing. He comes in the chat sometimes. He'll drop comments on the videos. I appreciate him for it because he educates me on boxing concepts. We all can take more information about the things that we're a little bit lacking in. There's guys out there that are very knowledgeable in MMA, but they might not have as much specialized knowledge in one of these other combat sports. They might not have the same background, or maybe they're not as good at math, or maybe they're not as diligent in their homework and they're not getting as good information and resources. So all these things are skills and assets. You leverage what you've got. Leverage what you've got and try and fill in the gaps and learn more along the way and pick up as much as you can, because it's a learning game. All this stuff right here has taught me a little bit. If I learn 1% about it, beautiful. If I learn 2% about it, 5% about it, great. Anything. If I could just close that knowledge gap, what can I do that will separate me from the market? That's what you got to ask yourself. And if the market all has the same opinion and all it does is, how could it possibly be sharp? Then it's just going along to get along and hope to ride the wave. If you're going to stand out and do something different, it requires a different level of effort or a different process or something else. Shout out Mel, asked a great question. Liam, Nate Diaz or Jake Paul? I feel like Nate is about to get beat up. I actually missed. I did not watch. So I hadn't even seen it. I didn't bet on it either because the market was freaking me out. But Jake Paul and Tommy Fury, I have to go back and watch it. I have not seen Jake Paul lose that boxing match yet. But I did think it was a categorically different challenge than the other fights because this was a boxer, versus another boxer, a young guy versus another young guy. That's normally a pretty competitive fight, broadly speaking. Two guys that are of relatively similar skill parity, let's call it. Close. Relative size parity, let's call it. That's a fight that's going to play out a lot closer. He dropped Fury, says Mel, and that's great. I mean, he has power. I've actually seen him box in person. Saw him drop Tyron Woodley in Cleveland. So he definitely has power, no doubt about it. Or not drop him or whatever the hell he did. He got rocked backwards actually by Tyron Woodley. But point being, I've seen him fight in person. He definitely has some power in his hands. Mel is not wrong that MMA boxing is not great. But Diaz, he's kind of a non-traditional guy. He's a boxer in many ways. Like he fights in more of that boxing style, the stance with the elbows kind of folded and the hands up like this. And that actually works better historically if you have boxing gloves, right? Because now I can cover my body. They can't hit my legs, right? But why did the Diaz brothers constantly get destroyed in MMA? Guys aren't going to play by those rules. They kick your legs. They'll kick you in the body like George Masvidal did to Nate like 50 times. Like just bang, load up, kick to the body. Hands up here, now kick your body as hard as I possibly can, right? That's part of the switch-ups that get to Nate. I think Nate is somewhat competitive in that fight, just off first thought. I'd give it more analysis over time. I will say for sure that you just have to give a handicapping benefit always to the really young guy who's on insane designer steroids, who's probably really bitter that he lost his last fight, probably wants a little get back. He's been on a flurry of knocking out these old, washed MMA guys that are past their prime, don't really have the greatest chins. And on top of that, are probably just there for the bag, like my Missouri boys, Ben Askren and Tyron Woodley, who I got no disrespect on their name. I have much respect for their names. Go get the bag, gentlemen. But, I just felt like, especially Ben, Ben is a real competitor at heart, and I just feel like he did not have any intention of competing in that fight with Paul. He was just ready to sell it down the river. So all respect to Ben. I'm sure he went out there thinking, he didn't train. He just showed up. So I think that Nate will train. I think he'll be in good shape. He's saying he wants it to go long. Like, he's saying he wants it to be a long fight. How many rounds it will be is a curious factor to me. I don't think Jake has great cardio. I'd be curious again to see how it held up in the Paul fight. Maybe it's getting better over time. But yeah, basically, I think it's a competitive fight. Honestly, I think it's a more honest fight off the rip. But I think that the guy with way more chance to win by knockout, especially in the first 5 rounds, is Jake Paul. So you got to take that into account for the capping. Also, want to shout out my guy Sander. I see he dropped a couple comments. He said, after seeing Paul's boxing in his last fight, I feel like Nate has a decent chance. He's really not that great. Yeah, and I kind of agree that Paul, he's a little bit more style than substance, a little bit more flash and pizzazz and positioning than skill. But also, could still be making improvements. 26 on all the juice, got good coaches. So yeah, I think you make a great point, and I'm curious to see if he responds. Greetings from my guy DX Flyer. Appreciate you being here. I've done Thai boxing for around 6 years. Shout out, Sander. Great stuff. And I feel like the intricacies of boxing don't really apply there, sadly. Fair, man. Sometimes it's just about what's effective, right? I like what my guy Fight Talk says. Fight Talk, always active. Appreciate you, my brother. Says, Nate will hold his own versus Jake, I think. Jake gasses, Nate will beat him via cardio. Hey, brother, I'm not putting it past him. I think among the MMA fighters he's fought, Nate has the best style, but the problem is, Nate, he's sometimes a little bit too passive, where he's just walking forward and not throwing enough. And I'm curious to see if that's a little different in boxing, where he doesn't have to worry about the leg kicks, because he does have good cardio. He can go pretty hard for a decent clip. It's curious to see how he'll do, though, guys, because the one thing is, man, aging gracefully in combat sports is tough, but doing it against younger guys is real tough. So, I'm happy for Nate. I hope he gets a freaking huge wad of cash because he deserves it and more. Yeah, and Sander made the same point. Good to see him get the bag, though. Fought their asses off. UFC had the name, profited from it. Yeah, go get the money, man. It's a prize fighting business. Go get your money. Jake has the overhand right with power, but he tires quick. I agree. Nate with his volume, better technique, cardio. Yeah, man, it's literally just it's an interesting, well-matched fight. And you hate to say that about a Jake Paul fight, but, both guys have a compelling narrative for why they could win. I'm young. I have power. I want to be here, and this guy doesn't, and I'll beat him up. And the other guy is an ornery prick from Stockton, California that don't like to lose, and he's had way more experience. He's had way more fights. He's beat up a lot of fake tough guys, and, what's one more? So I think that Jake Paul is a real tough guy, but I do think that, the foray into the MMA guys, being capped off with that Anderson fight. I mean, he's fighting guys in their 40s, right? It's like, it's just a categorically tough thing, when you're 25 fighting 40-year-olds. We're not far away from it with old Nate here, but I think he's a little bit closer to his prime. I think Anderson had been a little bit more proximally aged out of his prime, let's say. Mel asks, if PFL really buying Bellator? I found that rumor to be completely nonsensical. It doesn't make any sense to me. A literal broadcast partner of the PFL is ESPN, that also houses the UFC, as one of their primary brands. And they're going to bring in, like, they're going to let PFL purchase Bellator to create a rival promotion also on ESPN. None of it made sense to me from the jump. And I think that the new thing in MMA Twitter is like somebody just tweets some shit that's completely made up and it just goes viral. Like, that's just an easy way to go viral nowadays. Just tweet some complete bullshit. And then people are like, oh, wow, that's awesome. And then they're like, oh, wait, but it's not true. So it doesn't matter. You know, it's like Anderson Silva's back out of retirement and he's fighting Tito Ortiz next week in a bar. It's like, yeah, I mean, it's fun, except that it's a complete lie. You know, it's awesome, except that it's completely fictional. So I think that there could be something real behind it. Sometimes where there's smoke, there's fire. When they were talking about the sale of the UFC, Dana White is like, those rumors are completely ridiculous. It's insane that anybody would say that 2 days later, the company sold. It's like, people lie about this stuff too. But for me, I just can't understand like the business rationale. Like, I don't understand how it would work. You know, it would make more sense to me if Bellator was buying the PFL or something. Like, Bellator is owned by Viacom. So what? Oh, damn. There you go. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Viacom's been losing money on Bellator for so long. Viacom shopping Bellator wouldn't be surprising, but it doesn't really make sense. Yeah, I don't think PFL is profitable. Man, I don't think any of them are profitable. Who's profitable? You know? Some investors getting screwed somewhere. Because I don't know which one of these guys is profitable besides the UFC. They're a really good monopoly. They do what they do very well. You know, it's hard to make money in the MMA business if you don't have the brand name letters UFC attached. So, guys, with that, it's 3:40 in the evening. I hope that you guys have had a wonderful time. I know that I have. I hope that you guys have felt like you learned something. I know that I did from you guys in the chat. I always say, and I truly believe, sharpest chat in the game. Thank you guys for being a part of it. If you guys want to support this channel, go ahead and drop a subscribe below. I really appreciate it if you do. Drop a like on the video as well. If you guys want, go ahead and turn on that bell for notifications. It will remind you when I'm going to be doing the show with Rich at 3 o'clock. And if I have any other content in the meantime, I'm going to try and just keep attacking on here, be more active, putting out more content. Love making the connection with you guys. Love coming on here, talking, chatting some shit about these fights. But also want to make sure that I have enough time to do the work, do the due diligence, come prepared for my show with the research. So, yeah, I just appreciate everybody that supports me. If you guys are interested in more information, research, whatever, as I do it, all the bets as I place them, that information as well in the description box below. But with that being said, all you guys deserve some sleep, unless where you're at in the world, you're just waking up for the day, in which case I hope that you're having a great time. You know, I hope that you have a great rest of your day and keep it rocking, because we don't go to sleep when we're tired. We go to sleep when the job's done. So the job is now done for today, and we're right back to it tomorrow. The work is never over. God bless you all. I hope that you enjoyed those fights. Until next time, this has been Liam's first take on UFC 288, and I hope that you guys learned something from it and enjoyed it. God bless, and we'll see you next time. Take care.